Hey guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with an all-new Ask Me Anything. Today, however, is not your ordinary Ask Me Anything. This is one that is devoted completely and solely to true crime topics that you guys have asked me to look into. Now, before we get started, I also just want to say that this is going to be a part 1 of a part 2 special edition Ask Me Anything. And here's why. Looking into this kind of a topic, or all of these kinds of a topic, not an energy that I want to be in all that much, but I was committed. And you guys know that from one AMA to another, I will always carry over questions that go unanswered. So I was really committed to try to get through all of the topics you guys have requested. Now look at it this way. Imagine, if you will, you're a child and you're playing outside in the mud. Your mom looks out the kitchen window. She sees that you're playing in the mud. But this is not just like dry mud. This is wet mud. So you've covered your arms in the mud, your legs in the mud, you're doing like war paint all over your face with the mud, you've got it smeared in your hair, it's all over your clothing. Your mom is gonna probably come outside and say to you, come inside from that mud. Let's get you into the bath and wash you off. Kind of look at it that way. Except this wasn't my mom coming and tapping me and saying like, that's enough, dear, let's get you inside and wash you off. It was kind of like my higher self was saying, that's enough, dear. Let's get you out of here. So I had to stop looking into these energies. I will say, however, that I had gotten through probably about well over 60% of the topics requested, and I will return to all of the other topics that I have not answered in this AMA in a future AMA. So any questions that you have regarding true crime, you can comment down below in this one, as there will be another part to this at some future date. So first and foremost, if your question wasn't answered, it's in this case not because I didn't go to the door and the inhabitants on the other side didn't let me in. It's literally because my higher self was like, let's get you inside and clean you off. Not an energy that was sustainable for me to be in. So again, any new questions that come up, please comment down below and let me know other true crime topics that you would like me to look into. Unless you have already requested it in the past, then it's already in my notebook and there's no need to follow up with that. And with that in mind, let's dive in. So first and foremost, as promised, we're going to start with someone by the name of Rebecca Zahau, because she is somebody that I had looked into, I didn't date it, but this was actually for the last AMA, and I try to keep my AMAs at about or under 3 hours time. So I didn't have a chance to do her for the last AMA, and it worked out perfectly because this one is devoted all to true crime, and this is a true crime story. So we're gonna start first and foremost with her. So for anybody that is curious, who is Rebecca Zahau? Rebecca Zahau was married to a man named Jonah Shackness, and she lived in, I believe, Southern California, maybe like somewhere around San Diego. She had died under suspicious circumstances, and what made it even more suspicious was the fact that it was ruled a suicide, which kind of seemed like a impossibility because of how her body was discovered. And basically, without going into too much gory detail, she had hung herself. Her arms were bound behind her back and her feet were bound as well. So, riddle me this, Batman. How the fuck did she hang herself? Okay, but it was still ruled a suicide nonetheless. Let's explore what actually happened there and why it was ruled a suicide. I'm also going to first and foremost say that in connection to Rebecca Zahau, she was a stepmother to I can't remember what I had read. I want to say maybe like a 5 or 7 year old stepson. And a couple of days prior to her committing suicide, there had been some sort of an accident in the house with him and he was in the hospital. okay? Because it very much does connect to what had happened to Rebecca, and that's why I am mentioning it. So let's see what Rebecca's energy wanted to share with me. So first and foremost, as soon as I had connected to her energy, she was pacing. She was waiting, and she indicated the reason that she is pacing is she is waiting to see what will happen with her case, and if the truth will ever be found out, and if the truth will ever come out. What actually happened? And she shared that she is nervous and anxious because everything has been a shit show, at least on her side, the side being like the other side, because she's not on the earth plane any longer. So everything has been a shit show, at least on, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Everything has been a shit show on this side, on our side. She feels like everything has been a shit show on our side here because she still very much feels connected to this side. But the reason that she still feels so connected to this side is not even for the sake of herself, and she is not even so much like waiting with anticipation to see what's going to happen if the truth is going to come out for her. It's more for her parents and for her family's sake. And that she's acknowledging it's very important for her family to know that she did not commit suicide. And it's not just enough for the facts of the case to not add up and for it to still be suggested that it was suicide and it was ruled suicide, but it's very important for her family to know definitively, not just for the facts to speak, but for the authorities to say that this is actually not a suicide. Now, she also pointed out that the supposed way in which she had taken herself off the earth plane would have been a physical impossibility, and therefore it's actually laughable, in her opinion, that anyone would reasonably think, based on the evidence, that she was able to take herself off the earth plane. How would she have even done it? She jumped over a railing, because the way they had found her body was like in a foyer of a home, and there was like a staircase going up to the second level, and that she had supposedly jumped over the railing, had attached herself to something, jumped over the railing that was supposed to protect people from falling down to the floor below. She had jumped over the railing, and she had managed to do that while her arms were bound behind her back and her feet were bound as well. So in her opinion, it's laughable. How could anybody actually look at the evidence and suggest she had taken herself off the earth plane? So I asked her what had actually gone down, what had happened, and this is what she had shared. She knew her husband, Jonah, was involved in some shady shit. But he also seemed so responsible and that he was on top of it. So the fact that that she was taken out so soon after the accident with her stepson was cruel. But it's also how she came to see just how not on top of it he actually was. So let's say he wasn't bringing his work home with him. So the fact that he wasn't bringing his work home, she took to mean he's got it under control. He doesn't have to work at it at all when he's at home. In fact, that's not what it meant. It just meant that he was not responsibly being on top of it and dealing with it. But he was not on top of his shit. Now, she also had shared with me, it was very important for her to state that what had actually happened with Max, her stepson, must have been an accident, first and foremost because she did feel responsible for him and she would not have let anything happen to him, though she also did admit to me she did not see what happened. But she knows because it didn't happen at her hands, she didn't do anything to him, and there was no one suspicious in the house at the time of the act. And I'm not entirely sure what happened. I think he had maybe actually freaky, right? I think he had actually maybe also fallen down the flight of stairs. I'm not entirely sure. But she had basically shared she didn't do anything to him, and there was no one suspicious in the house at the time. So she's conceding that while she didn't see it, it must have actually have been an accident, because she took her role as a stepmother very seriously, and she never would have hurt him. She also said while she feels responsible for him, she didn't feel responsible per se to what happened to him because it was an accident, but she still feels horrible that it happened to him when it was on her watch. Now, this is when she started to go into and share with me what had happened on the night that she crossed over to the other side. So on that night, she shared that she had been home alone as her husband Jonah was at the hospital and staying with Max. Two men had come to the door under the guise of wanting to see if they could do anything for the family, because it was known what had happened, that there was an accident with Max and Max was in the hospital. So the community knew about it, people knew about it. So it wasn't like so unreasonable that people would be showing up and wanting to say, hey, is there anything that we can do? Is there anything in any way that we can help? What was a little unusual was that it was rather late when this had actually happened. However, these two men were not complete strangers. She recognized at least one of them. So they were not complete strangers to her, so she had let them in. Because it wasn't like two men are knocking at the door, she had no idea who they were, and they're saying, oh, hey, we heard what happened to Max, can we help? She knew who one of them was. Okay, it was a little bit late. Maybe they just got off from work or whatever it is. They were coming by to see if there's anything they can do to help. She also shared that they were not friends per se, but they were people that she had seen around from time to time. And it was the kind of relationship with someone, or the kind of person that you would see them. It's not like you would go over and you would start talking to them like, oh, hey, how are you? What's up? What's doing? It was more kind of like a casual acquaintance, kind of the way that if you saw somebody that you kind of knew, you would have like nodded to them, like to indicate, oh, hey, yeah, I see you, but not that you really have a relationship with them or there was anything actually to discuss with them. Now, she also had shared that they were not business associates either. So how did she come to know them? They were not business associates by the way that they were dressed. And this is what she had shown to me. Both of them were wearing baggy jeans, oversized, very oversized and large white t-shirts and white sneakers. But one of them had a very nice and expensive watch on that always seemed out of place on him. So every time she had seen these two men, she had always noticed one of them had an extremely expensive watch. And based on the way that he had always been dressed and the times that she had seen him, the watch seemed out of place on him. So therefore, this led her to conclude that they were maybe couriers of some sort, and they were responsible for transporting things, or they were hired help, but not hired help. And she's differentiating this for me. She wanted to give me as much information as she possibly could. So she's really differentiating, not hired help like movers, right? I am moving offices or I'm moving my home, so I need to hire movers to come move things for me. No. It was more like they were hired security or something like that kind of hired help. She also shared they were both brawny and definitely not the kind of men that somebody would mess around with. But again, she had seen at least one of them, so she didn't think anything of it, especially because they were coming around so soon after the accident. It wasn't like a month after the accident. It was like a couple of days after the accident. And they had indicated when they had got to the door that they wanted to see if there was anything that they could do to help, and she had let them in. Now, when she had let them in, she had taken them into the kitchen. She had offered them both if they wanted something to drink, and they had both declined, which may not seem like it's out of the ordinary, but I think she's actually trying to indicate if there was perhaps no DNA evidence that could have been collected as to indicate who it was that had done this. It was foresight on their part. She offered them something to drink. Maybe they weren't genuinely thirsty, but it was also like they didn't want to have DNA, right? Like they didn't want to leave fingerprints on the glasses. They didn't want to sip from it. They didn't want to leave any DNA behind. So it was kind of like strategic on their part. Because also keep in mind, when somebody is opening up and sharing this level of information and details, it's with a reason, which is also, again, why I'm always reading from my notes. Because when someone is bringing this information to me, I don't want to leave it out. She is saying, look, they knew what they were doing. That is why she was saying, I offered them something to drink and they had both declined it. And they were both kind of like standing around in the kitchen, like milling about, right? Like they weren't like leaning onto the countertop and trying to like engage in a conversation with her. They were just kind of like standing there. Again, like not wanting to touch anything per se. Now, she had also shared everything had seemed fine and nothing was amiss. Actually, nothing had seemed amiss at all until one of them had excused himself to have gone to the bathroom. And then she was just kind of standing there talking to one of the other guys. And while she was speaking to that one, the one that she knew, or the one that she indicated was the one that she had seen before, because remember, she had said earlier on, she recognized one of them. There was two men. She didn't recognize one. She did not recognize one of them. She only recognized, God, this is sounding so confusing. There was two men. She recognized one of them. She did not recognize the other one of them. So she was standing in the kitchen talking to the one that she knew, or she recognized, while the other one had excused himself to go to the bathroom. So nothing had seemed amiss at all while she was talking to the one that she said she knew, except the next thing she did actually know was that she was being grabbed behind. There was one hand over her mouth and one hand around her waist as she was being dragged backwards out of the kitchen. So, at least in the representation of how it was shown to me, was that she was standing with her back facing into the living room, talking to the one that she knew, or knew, like kind of knew. The other one had said he was going to the bathroom and he had excused himself and he had walked out of the room. Now, because of the way that she was actually positioned with her back facing into the living room, the guy who came back from the bathroom trip came behind her, wrapped his hand, one hand over her mouth so she would not be able to scream. His other hand was wrapped around her waist, and then she was being pulled backwards into the living room. She also shared that the one that had his arms around her was strong, so unbelievably strong, that he got her on his own and without help from the other guy. So while she was being pulled backwards out of the kitchen, the other guy that she knew, or kind of knew, was kind of like very slowly and methodically walking towards her while the other guy was pulling her into the living room. Now, the one that was pulling her into the room had put her down on the floor and then like on her back, and then he had straddled her. So he was sitting on top of her, and he had his knees on top of her arms, pinning her down. And because this is a big brawny guy, as she had indicated, and he was incredibly strong, there was nothing that she could actually do once she was being pinned down in this fashion. He still had one of his hands covering her mouth, and one of his hands was around her neck. So he's sitting on top of her, straddling her. His hands are not holding her hands down. He's got her arms pinned by his knees. One hand is covering her mouth and one hand is covering her neck. Okay. She still could not scream. The other guy slowly followed from the kitchen, and then he started asking her all sorts of questions. But she had no idea what he was talking about. And he just kept asking her questions and asking her names of specific people, asking if she had ever heard of them. She hadn't. And it was mostly about people and deals that her husband, Jonah, may have been involved in. She knew nothing about what he was asking. Now, her mouth was still covered and she was directed to answer with blinks. Like, do you know this person? If so, blink once. If you don't know them, blink twice. And that everything had happened so incredibly fast, like from the time she had let them in until the time she was thrown on the floor. And then this guy was just like bombarding her with all of these questions, was so incredibly fast. Like she still couldn't even wrap her mind around how incredibly fast everything had happened. It was at this point that the guy that was asking her the questions had finished asking her questions, and then he had gone to look around, but he was looking for something specific and something in particular, because she could see with her eyes what was going on. And it wasn't like he was just like walking around randomly, like looking behind the sofa, looking behind the TV, looking behind a plant. Like he was very methodical in what he was doing, where he was going. It was like he had in his mind, he knew there were certain places in the home that he wanted to look for whatever it is that he was looking for. She didn't know what it was. But she did indicate it was completely not random. And while the guy that was on top of her, pinning her down, said nothing to her. He was just sitting there. He said not a fucking word to her. Now, a few minutes later, the other guy that had gone looking for whatever it is that he was looking for had come back, and he had indicated, or he had said actually, because these are in quotation marks, "There's nothing here." And then he had followed that up with, "Let's do it." It was at this time that she was yanked off of the ground and she was dragged up the flight of stairs. Once they reached the top of the staircase, she was stripped down and was completely naked. She said everything that happened next was a blur, but mostly because she had been partially choked prior to them wrapping the rope around her neck. So she was like semi-conscious when all of this was going on. But yes, she does know what happened next because she saw her body once she was out of it. She might have been semi-conscious. It might have been like a complete blur, like what was going on to her. She was like kind of in and out of it. She maybe had like some awareness of things being done to her body. She wasn't really fully in it. She wasn't really conscious at that point. But at some point, she realized, oh shit, she was not in her body any longer, which was an indication that she had actually crossed over. Now, she also had indicated that while she was semi-conscious and she was not aware of what was done to her, following her being choked, what she did observe thereafter was that her hands and feet were tied, her hands were tied behind her back, and she had been thrown over the railing. She shared that the second she had died, she had popped out of her body and saw her body. Now, the men were still there. They were watching and waiting to make sure that she was deceased. And once they were sure that she was, one wrote something on a door, and then they had left. And she wasn't paying attention to what was written, other than she had observed one of them writing something on a door, but she had decided to stay with her body, mostly because she was in shock. She had shared that this whole thing, from the time that they had entered until the time that she had crossed over, was probably under 15 minutes. They knew what they went there for. They had a plan of action of exactly what they were going to do and how everything was going to go down. That's why it was so incredibly fast. They went there with this in mind. They were looking for something. They were going to try to find it. They were going to try to get answers from her. And then they were going to make sure that they left her deceased. They were methodical, and they went knowing exactly what they were going to do that night. She, however, was left completely stunned. It was minutes, and she was suddenly dead. Now, she said at that time she could have actually had crossed over, but as in left the earth plane altogether. However, it was too much, too soon to even think about, and that her body was just laying there alone, and she did not know for how long it was going to be there. And the whole thing was too unbearable. It was minutes, and she was suddenly dead. And it's like, wait, what? I can go, but I just died. Like, what do you mean I can go? No, I want to stay here. I don't know when my body's going to be discovered. So she made the choice to stay on the earth plane and to stay with her body. And this is when she had also shared with me that in her staying, she came to learn a great number of things she did not know before. So she got to see certain things as if she was a fly on the wall. And she had therefore seen things that she did not previously know, such as, first and foremost, when the police arrived, the first officer to arrive made a phone call to whom she did not know, but he made a phone call and he had said, quote, another one. And while the police officer had not said her name, but he had referred to her by her husband. Like it's Jonah Shackness's wife. Without a name, as if to indicate the importance of who the body was who she was connected to. She was the wife of Jonah Shackness. That was more important and notable than anything else. And then what she had also observed was that there seemed to be no effort on the police's part at the time that they had gotten there, other than to come to the conclusion that this had been suicide. So she was there with her body, observing as the police had come in and they had done a cursory walkthrough to satisfy their obligation to do so. But as soon as they had arrived, they had already determined that she had killed herself without looking at any of the evidence. Like, how exactly did this woman kill herself? So yes, they had determined that she had killed herself without looking at any of the evidence to the contrary, such as the condition of her body. And yes, when somebody is choked, there is physical evidence left behind. You will see like marks around their neck that would be inconsistent with like the ligature marks left by a rope. Something happens to the eyes of a person when they are choked as well. So, and then also they were just completely overlooking, like, again, riddle me this, Batman. Her arms were bound behind her back. Her feet were bound together. How the fuck was she supposed to throw herself over a railing? Okay. So despite all of the evidence to the contrary, it didn't make anybody blink because this was the narrative that they were going with. Case closed. Now, what she has also shared with me that she had come to understand through the fact that she decided to remain on this side and with her body was that she was collateral damage. This was a message that was sent to her husband because he had been a bad little boy and he had to be put back in line. So see the earlier parts where she had shared, what? She thought he was on top of his work. He was not on top of his work. So he had been a bad little boy and he had to be put back in line. Now, she also had said that the way that she was killed was done in such a way to specifically send a message, to keep his mouth shut, because how was she killed? Hanging. And if you go back to the video that I had done on Nick Carter, I had gone through all of the various different ways in which somebody in the industry would be taken out or would choose to take themselves out, that all of those ways serve a specific purpose. So what is the message sent when somebody is hung? Don't be a rat. It's literally a way of trapping the voice inside of the body by breaking the throat. So it sends a message to the survivors of that person, you keep your mouth shut too. So this was done to send a message to him to shut his mouth and not be a snitch. And she had also shared, the police also knew exactly what it meant, and they were not going to be a snitch either. That is why they stuck to this particular narrative. Because to say that it was actually a homicide would be making them a snitch. And then it would have opened a whole can of worms and a whole further investigation. So they just had to rule it as a suicide. So I hope that that answers your question on the young woman named Rebecca Zahau. And if not, please comment down below and I will look into any questions that you ask. Now, the next person that had been suggested for me to look into is someone by the name of Elizabeth Smart. Now, what is interesting about Elizabeth Smart is that she was 14 years old when she had been abducted from her bedroom in 2002 by a man named Brian David Mitchell and his partner, a woman named Wanda Barzee. Now, very interesting, she was actually abducted from her bedroom and her little sister was in the bedroom as well. And after Elizabeth had been taken from her bedroom, the sister that was in the bedroom with her had stayed in bed for another couple of hours, and then she had gone to her parents to tell them that someone had broken in and had taken Elizabeth from the bedroom. And the parents didn't believe it, so they actually stayed in bed. And then in the morning, everyone was getting up, and then lo and fucking behold, they get to her bedroom and she's not there. And how they were, I again had looked into this, here we go, at the beginning of the month, because this one I did date. So this was July 2nd. And as you know, for anything where I don't know the specifics of it, I'll first do the channeling and then I'll look into the three-dimensional information that's reported online because I don't want to be influenced by it. So this was over a month ago that I had looked into this. So if you want to know like precisely what had happened, I suggest Googling it as well. But basically, from what I remember reading a month ago was that the sister had heard Brian David Mitchell's voice when he had spoken to Elizabeth. And she had said that it was a voice that she had heard before, but she couldn't quite place where she had heard it. And how was this a voice that she had actually heard before? Because Brian David Mitchell was hired kind of like as a day worker, and he had done some work on the house. So he was not like a complete stranger to the family, but he had seen Elizabeth prior, which is how he had known that he had wanted to take her. And this very much comes to play in not just the three-dimensional explanation of what had happened, but when I get to the end and I discuss like what was the behind a veil explanation of what had gone on, you'll understand more about it. Okay, so this is what happened when I had connected to Elizabeth Smart's energy. Oh, and by the way, she was discovered. She was found, I think, maybe 5 months later or so. Absolutely fascinating. Not even just the way that she had been discovered, but the way in which her identity had been concealed was that Brian David Mitchell dressed both Elizabeth and Wanda, his partner, in a garb that was to conceal their identity. And they were once in a library, and someone had thought that Elizabeth looked familiar and had called the police over. And this Brian David Mitchell is not a stupid man. No matter what he has claimed about himself, he is not a stupid man, because what did he do? When the police had come over, he had indicated that the religion that they follow is one in which the women have to be dressed such a way in which to conceal their identity, and that they were not allowed to talk to men. So that therefore he was putting this obfuscation in front of the police's ability to talk to Elizabeth Smart and to ask her, is everything okay? What's your name? Who are you? Not a stupid man. Okay. So as soon as I had connected to Elizabeth's energy, I had to take a big, full, deep sigh, as if she was breathing through me. And she had said that she hasn't ever really felt safe, or like there's enough space inside of her to take a big, deep breath, because she has had to cordon off parts of herself in order to survive. There's this incredible sadness all around her, and it's a sadness that even she does not want to touch. And that should she want to touch it, not just physically touch it, but like touch it on an energetic or emotional or spiritual or psychological point of view, it's the kind of sadness that she would need to wear triple pairs of gloves even to start thinking about touching it. That's how much distance and space she wants to put between herself and everything. Everything, because there's more than meets the eye in terms of what had happened to Elizabeth. And she realizes that she does not have the space to begin to unpack it. And this is because she has had to continue to put one foot in front of the other in order to survive. Do not stop. Do not slow down. Because if you do, you will die. This is what she told herself the entirety of the time that she was in the possession of Brian David Mitchell and Wanda Barzee. Do not stop and do not slow down. Because if you do, Elizabeth, this is her own thoughts to herself, you will die. So this is what she had told herself every single day, multiple times a day, that she was in his possession so that she could survive. So what she has done now is still very much connected to what she had done to survive when she was with him. Because she doesn't feel like even now, all of these years later as an adult, this happened in 20 years ago. She was 12 then? Okay, so she's 34 years old. In all of that time since then, she has continued to put one foot in front of the other and tell herself she has to keep on keeping on. She does not even feel safe now, 20 years later, to slow down and to begin to unpack this. So one can also say that therefore Elizabeth Smart is living in a trauma response. But she also said she cannot stop now because the entire world is watching. They're watching her. And as a aside, which by now you guys probably know I tend to go on asides, I had looked at her social media page. Very interesting. So first and foremost, she is married now, and I think she has 3 kids. She wrote a book about her ordeal, and her social media page is just kind of like showing like how great her life is, how well adapted she is, how well adjusted she is. She's on vacation, she's here and there, she loves her family, she loves her husband, like very much just trying to put the positivity out there, which I think is very, very admirable. However, I also noticed something that was very interesting, which is that she has made no effort whatsoever to conceal the identity of her children, first and foremost, but second, not just the identity of them, because her social media page is completely wide the fuck open. Anybody can see it. Anybody could see the faces of her family. She also shares pictures on her social media of her children in their bathing suits, in various states of dress and undress. Not like completely nude, but enough of them that could make a very compelling page for somebody to look at, should they have those kind of proclivities. And should they have that kind of interest in seeing such kind of photographs. For free, because her page is wide the fuck open. And because she is somebody that is of public interest, it would make sense that people would actually go to her page and would want to look at it. And I find that to be interesting, because what was done to her when she was taken was she was, and I'm not going to say the word, so I'm going to kind of dance around it, but you'll know exactly what I mean. She was forced to engage in non-consensual sex with Brian David Mitchell every single day and sometimes multiple times per day. And her social media page is wide the fuck open for anyone to see her children dressed in bathing suits. So I just personally find that to be a little interesting, coming from somebody that knows that there are people that have these kind of interest, sexual kind of interest in minors, and that she would be so willing and open to share that. It's not a judgment. It's just to say that it's something very, very interesting and notable that I had noticed about her page, and that it had struck me as interesting and notable because of what she had next shared with me. So she has not since then, in the 20 years since then, felt like she could slow down to start to unpack everything that had been done to her, because now the world is watching. They're watching her. So she wants to make sure her Instagram page looks like she's living her best life. Look how well adjusted I am. Look how healed I am. Look what a good life I am living right now. But also, while you're here looking at how great I am, look at my children in their bathing suits. Not that that's what she's actually saying, but it's what's implied. And here's why. As soon as she had referenced being watched, she had indicated to me that she, as a child, had always been watched, and she was acutely aware of it. That is why her social media page is wide the fuck open, and there are so many pictures of her children frolicking around in bathing suits. She was raised in a culture in her family where this is normal to her. And why was it normal to her? Because she was watched. She was the favored child for watching by her father. He would, at some point or another, watch all of them when the children were showering, but she was the favorite. And what had she then shared with me was that she always felt there was therefore a film or residue on her because of it. And the example I've kind of given in the past is, imagine, if you will, you go into a smoker's house. Maybe they are no longer smoking, but they've not gotten rid of the rugs, and they've not gotten rid of the furniture, and they've not changed their clothing. So there is a strong smell of residue that still clings to everything that is a fabric that will absorb the smoke, or will absorb the smell of smoke onto it. So that way, when you go over to visit them and you plop down on the sofa, the smell of smoke hits you, even though that person is no longer a smoker. This is the way that energy tags work. Energy tags stay connected to your body. She was therefore then marked, if you will, because of the fact that she was the favored child to have been watched. She was therefore then marked, and there was a film or residue on her because of it. So she was energetically tagged, and therefore was a kind of like, imagine, if you will, on a dark day, or it's midnight. You're with your family and everybody's walking in the park. It's midnight. And there's no lights on in the playground, okay? But your entire family is wearing black and they're walking in it. You're the only one who's not wearing black. If there was somebody that was driving by or walking by, it's midnight and everyone's dressed in black, who's gonna most stand out to that person? You, because you are wearing white. Everyone else is gonna kind of like blend into the background. So this Brian David Mitchell probably had seen all of the children on some level, but because she was the favorite child to have been watched when she was showering, she was marked, so to say. So when he was looking at all of them, she was like the shiniest, brightest object to him. Just like if you were in a park at midnight wearing white, when everyone else around you was wearing black. She stood out to him. She was energetically tagged because of it, and another way of saying it, therefore, is that she was more or most a vibrational match for him because of it. She stood out to him. That was the one he had seen the most because she energetically stood out to him, because she was energetically tagged. And that's why she was the one that he had wanted. Now, it was at this time that I actually tried to inquire with her about what was so this is like the energetic explanation behind what was going on there, right? I wanted to see, was there something going on like behind the veil? Was this like some sort of a past life connection that she had had with him? Were they somehow like tied through various incarnations? Was there some sort of a karmic explanation here? And it was at this point that Elizabeth was like, no, just no. Not that she was denying that this was a possibility. It was just to kind of say like, don't even look at it. Like, no, just no. So whereas before she was amenable, one could say, to having me look at her energy, she was like, absolutely fucking not. Don't even go there. And the explanation for it was that she can't even entertain the idea or the notion in any way, shape, or form that she is connected to Brian David Mitchell or Wanda Barzee from previous incarnations. She just can't, she won't even go there. She's so thoroughly disgusted by him and by her, she can't entertain the idea that in another life, in another body, with a different name, with a different identity, that they were ever connected. And because of that, because she was obfuscating it at this point and she was saying, no, don't even go there, don't even look there. When somebody says, please don't look into my energy, I stop looking into their energy. It was at this point that she did not want me to proceed any further, so I had then therefore stopped. But it was not because I didn't make the effort. It was not because I didn't want to come to understand what was the additional soul explanation behind the veil, but because she had rescinded her consent for me to read her energy at that point. So I hope that that answers any questions that you have on Elizabeth Short, and if not, please comment down below. Now, another question had come in, and this is actually not even in my notes, but I remember it. I mean, it was in the topic that I wanted to look into, but it wasn't something that I had actually looked into, but because we're touching on this right now, I'm gonna actually share it, which is somebody had asked me if there is bullying in the true crime community, especially online, because there's, I mean, not just on YouTube, but there's so many different places and so many different forums that like-minded people could connect, and they could start to talk about like their theories on different particular cases. So what would be the explanation on bullying that's happening in the true crime community? So like, let's say you share your opinion on a particular case and it's not lining up with other people. Why would they then therefore be bullying somebody? And being, maybe it would even go beyond like cyberbullying. Maybe it would even go to like cyber stalking, because you're so aggrieved by somebody having a different opinion of you, or a different opinion of the opinion that you had shared. This is going to connect to what I had said about people being tagged, so to say, and being an energetic match. So first and foremost, this, for whatever reason, if there is a differing of opinions that would supersede regular communication and it would turn into cyberbullying and cyber stalking, it's an indication that that person that is on the receiving end of the bullying and the one that is being stalked, it's actually a opportunity to realize or to explore why that person might be a vibrational match for those other people. Because, as I have shared in so many of my other videos, like attracts like. So we're, again, not just these hapless victims being dropped into, we're not like pinballs being dropped into a pinball machine getting knocked around by life. So if something is happening of that nature, it's because there is some sort of a similar vibration that is making the victim of the cyberbullying and the perpetrator of the cyberbullying to be a vibrational match. And it could be any number of things. Maybe it's just both the fact that these are individuals that are in a true crime forum, and therefore because they are inundating their senses with these things, can already be lowering them and making them a lower vibration, and then therefore they're just a vibrational match. So this is not, and the reason I'm saying it as such is because it's not victim blaming. I'm not saying that, for example, like this person, because I don't know, but I'm not saying that this person has invited it or initiated it, or had maybe even said something, or maybe even like challenged or said something in a way that was like, threatening to this other person, and it turned into this whole brouhaha. I don't know. The fact is, when something like this happens, it is because these two individuals are a vibrational match. So this is an opportunity for the person to explore what has led to their vibration being lowered, that they were then therefore a vibrational match for the cyberbullying and cyber stalking. So I don't see this as a bad thing. I see this as a good thing. It's an opportunity to explore where and how has this person's vibration wobbled or faltered a little bit to where it had become lower. And then through the understanding of that, they can then therefore take the necessary steps to fortify their own personal vibration, and thus not allowing them to be a vibrational match for this kind of behavior in the future. So I hope that answers your question about cyberbullying and things of that nature. And if not, please comment down below. Okay. The next person that I had been asked to look into is a person by the name of George Smith. Fascinating fucking case. I actually remember when this had happened. So when this came around, I was like, that name sounds familiar. And just wow. That's first and foremost what I'm going to just say is wow. Second, let me tell you who this George Smith is. So George Smith had gone missing from a cruise ship on his honeymoon. How the fuck does that even happen, right? Where the fuck does somebody go missing on a cruise ship? There's only one place they can go if they're missing. It's overboard. So what happened here? So the night that he had gone missing, because it was his honeymoon, he had just actually gotten married, there was some questions about foul play, but they could never pin it down to any one particular person. They weren't even sure who it was that was actually engaged in it. But they had found, I think I had read they had found like a broken glass in the cabin, and then they had found like a smear of blood, I think, on the railing of the balcony to his room. Okay, so let's explore, what did George Smith's energy want to share with me? And I think this was back in 2005, if memory serves me correctly. And I also had read that his then wife, who was then a widow, had married just a few short years later, which I found to be particularly interesting and notable. Okay, so let's dive into it. So as soon as I had connected to George Smith's energy, there was so much sadness around him. he said he can't believe she'd do him in like that, referring to his then wife, Jennifer. He also shared with me he did not see her clearly when he was alive, and there was no amount of time they would have been together that would have allowed him to see her clearly, because she did not want to accurately be seen. This was a woman that was operating with a facade, is another way of saying it. Okay, she was obfuscating her actual true identity, even from her husband. She was very carefully veiling herself and had fooled him, and it wasn't until he had crossed over that he had had the chance to see it. He also shared with me that he had chosen to see various different outcomes to his demise, as well as the relationship that he had had with Jennifer, and he had seen how the most likely outcome for him would have been where they stayed together for years, in which she would have slowly chipped away at him and his self-esteem. Now, this would have been at the point where they already would have had children together, and therefore he would have stayed for the sake of his children, because he would wanted to have done the right thing. But what was also shown to him is that she would have cheated repeatedly until the point where, and this would have been ongoing, she would chip away at his self-esteem, chip away at his identity, cheat on him, continue to cheat on him. And this would have been going on all through the time that the children were grown up. And then at that point, they would choose to divorce. So therefore, it was not actually a life he would have liked to have lived for himself, as he had seen the energetic toll that it would have taken on him. So while he's acknowledging that it sounds like it's a funny thing to say, he actually recognizes why it was better for him to have chosen this path instead, and to have crossed over when he did, so that he could have saved himself a lifetime of suffering and stuffing himself into places that he did not belong with her. So again, see parts passing, we are not hapless victims. We are the cosmic architects of her life. And he was shown the possible likely outcomes of how his life with her would have played out, and it would have been a miserable fucking existence for him. So he had then therefore chosen, you know what? This is not a life I want to live. So he had then therefore chosen the route of crossing off the earth plane earlier. So he had said that on the night that he had disappeared, him and Jennifer had gotten into a fight. And this had triggered, therefore, in him some sort of an inner knowing on a subconscious level, where he was recognizing, hold on, if we are fighting this badly on our honeymoon, when we're supposed to be all lovey fucking dovey and rainbows, unicorns, and butterflies, what does this mean for the rest of my marriage with this woman? What does this mean for the rest of my life with this woman? So what had happened, what had caused this massive fight, was that Jennifer had been flirting with other men on that night. Very aggressively flirting. And they had been at some sort of a club on the cruise ship where alcohol is free-flowing. And therefore it had, from his point of view, and this is not him eschewing responsibility, but he had said, like, he was so kind of taken aback by this. Like, whoa, what the actual fuck is going on here? that he felt it had caused him to excessively drink alcohol. So he was quite inebriated. So they had gotten into this massive fight because she was flirting with other men. She was probably, my take is it was not just flirting. It wasn't like just like, you know, batting her eyelashes at men. It maybe was where she was dancing very suggestively, or I would even say grinding. She was grinding up against other men at the dance club. He was observing this and he was like, what the actual fuck? They had gotten into a fight about it. Like, whoa, Jennifer, what the fuck is going on? We just got, like, you're my wife, what the fuck? And she just completely blew it off. And therefore, that had caused him to get excessively inebriated. He was just completely flabbergasted by this. And he could not believe that so soon after getting married, she was already behaving that way. So what had actually happened was not that, as the authorities had perhaps suggested, that this was a robbery gone wrong, because he is saying this is not a fucking robbery. You want to know what happened? I'm going to tell you. And it's not what the authorities have said. It wasn't a fucking robbery. This was where he had actually tried to defend his new wife's honor, even with her apparent lack of it. Because she was not behaving like a woman that had just gotten married. She had behaved in a way that alluded to the fact that she was willing to have sex with those other men. And because this was already at the point that he was inebriated, and everybody the fuck was inebriated, everyone had thought this was somehow a good idea. Not because they were in their right mind, they were all completely shit-faced. Him probably the most fucking shit-faced, because he could not fucking believe the way his wife was behaving. So he had to drink he didn't have to. He chose to drink excessive amounts of alcohol so he could numb himself out to the fact of who this woman was that he had just married. So it all seemed like it was a great idea. These men, first and foremost, were like, yeah, we're gonna fuck this woman in her hotel room and her husband's down with it. Fuck yeah. And again, everybody was inebriated. And because George has already chosen to share earlier on, this is very much in character for the way his entire marriage was going to line up, whether or not he would have been there, whether or not he would have been witness to it. This was his life. And it would have started on his fucking honeymoon. Okay. So it all seemed like it was a great idea until they got back to the hotel room and he had started to sober up even a little bit. But then the men were already there. They were already in the room with him and her. One of the men had said something to him, and one of the other men, there was at least two men. There was definitely at least two men. There might have possibly have even been a third, but there were definitely at least two men there. And I'm going to touch on why I can say definitively there were two a little bit later on because of what was shown to me. But she was definitely dancing. There was 3 or 4 friends. She was definitely dancing with all 3 or 4 of them in a very, very suggestive way. 2 of them were like, fuck yeah, we're going to fuck this bitch. Excuse my language. The 4th one was like, I'm out. No, this is too gross. I don't want any part of it. So the 4th one bounced. He had nothing to do with it. There was still possibly a 3rd one there because the energy of the 3rd one was around, but I don't know if the 3rd one was actually involved. Was he outside the room? Yes. Was he inside the room? Probably for some part of the time. I don't know the full extent of how long he had actually been there. So there was there was 4 friends. One of them had bounced. He was like, I want no part of this. 2 of them were directly involved in the homicide of George, but there was also a potential 3rd one. I just don't know if he was in the room at the point that this had happened. He might have like gotten to the room and been like, you know what? I thought this was a good idea. It's suddenly not feeling like such a good idea. I'm going to bounce now. So one of the men was acting a bit aggressive with George. The other man was starting to actually, I'm sorry, this is gross. He was actually starting, maybe it's not gross. It's only gross because she was married. But this is me being a little bit judgy, so I'm going to stop being a judgy bitch. one of the other men had started to kiss his wife Jennifer and was starting to grope and fondle her, and they were like moving towards the direction of the bed. And the other man was kind of like being a bit aggressive with George now, because I think they wanted George to just leave the room and they wanted to have a threesome with Jennifer. So he was like getting up in George's face and he was getting a bit aggressive because he wanted him to leave. He wanted this man to leave his wife in the bedroom in his own fucking suite. Okay, sure, make it make sense. Alcohol. Okay, so one of the men had started to act aggressively with him, and there was some sort of a physical altercation where George was trying to defend his wife and being like, no, the fuck no, this is not happening. And there was therefore some sort of a physical altercation in which George had become injured. Now the men, therefore, panicked, and in their effort, it's just compounding crimes. That's why I'm laughing, not because it's funny. But in their effort to conceal the crime that they had just committed, which was injuring a man in his own hotel suite, in his own cruise suite, in their effort to conceal the crime of what had happened or what they had done to him, stupid, they decided to throw him overboard. Okay. Because he would have come to at a certain point and he would have said, there was some sort of an he would have gone to, the cruise security, there was some sort of an altercation. The men could have hidden out in their hotel fucking room for the entire rest of the time. Like maybe they would have evaded responsibility. But what did they decide to do instead? They decided to throw him overboard. Okay. And they had done this because they did not want to get into trouble. Now, what was also shown to me by George was that he was not deceased at the time that he was thrown overboard. He had, however, been knocked out. But they didn't want him to come to at any point and to report it, so they had chosen to make sure he was never going to wake up again. So he was very much alive when he was thrown overboard, and he had kind of shared with me what the experience had been like for him, which was this sensation of just all this air rushing by him and this sense of movement. But again, he was not conscious at the time that this had happened. So it wasn't like this horrible traumatic experience for him where he knew that he was going to die and where he was like thrown overboard and he was watching the water rushing up to meet him. He was out of it. He was not even conscious. But there was this sensation of, and how did I know that he was alive at the time that he was thrown overboard? Because he had shared with me the sensation of the air moving around him. But he was out of his body before it had hit the water. Now, in a complete panic, because they hadn't gone there that night, these two guys, with the intention of killing a man, right? They hadn't even gone to the club that night thinking that they were going to hook up. Everyone was a little bit inebriated and she seemed more than, down with it, so why the fuck not? So in a panic, the men had quickly gone back to their rooms to evade detection of having ever been there, and Jennifer was in shock. So therefore, she had left the room and she had just wandered around the ship for hours until at a certain point she had sat down and fallen asleep. So what reportedly had happened the next day was, I believe she had woken up at a certain point. She had gone back to her room. He was not there. She thought he had gone to breakfast, so she had gone to work out or something. This is the story that she had told. She knew what happened. She was in the room. Now, what George had shared with me at this point is not to worry. Or for me to share with you guys not to worry. And why? Because this wasn't some random murder that had happened. Because anything so notable in a person's incarnation never is. This lines up with what I've been sharing with you guys time and again. We do have free will in the day-to-day, but the big things that happen to us, the big lessons, that is all stuff that we have agreed to experience before we have come in. And especially something as notable as the way in which a person would cross over, if it's at the hands of another, that's a really big notable thing, right? That's not like I went to sleep and I never woke up. Okay, this is where you're being taken off the earth plane by the hands of another. Big and notable, therefore not random. And that he had said this was some unfinished business that he had between these souls, these three souls, right? The souls of the two men that were responsible for his demise, but also specifically Jennifer. He said that these two men were merely there doing their part, and he has no ill will towards either of them. Now, he also had shared with me, because now that he is crossed over and he has that higher vantage point where he can see this, that he had shared, this is interesting, one of the brothers, because the two men that actually were behind in the room were brothers, and I think they were known by the police to be suspects in this, but there was a lack of actual evidence, so they couldn't arrest anybody. But one of the brothers had volunteered to come in to this life and to be a brother to this other person, to taper him out with his energy. Because without his influence, this is the brother that volunteered to come in and be a brother to the other brother, but without his influence, his life would have been so much worse. So this soul was looking at this other soul and saying, this soul is going to be a fucking shit show. I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to taper out his energy as best as I can to help him out. So he had volunteered to come in and to be a positive influence on his brother's life, because without him, it would have been so much worse. Even though by volunteering to come in and be this person's brother, it also meant that he was going to be involved in this crime. He also said that he has really enjoyed being on the other side, and he is now just about starting to get ready to incarnate again. So I hope that this has answered any questions that you have had on George Smith, or perhaps what went down that night, or contracts, reincarnation, things of that nature. And if not, please comment down below. Now, this is a much requested one on Columbine, and I'm going to share with you while I pet my hair, try to make it look a little less fluff. This is a very requested topic, and I'm going to get ahead of this, and I'm going to say that you're probably going to be incredibly frustrated by my energy read into what had gone on. You will see why. Okay, first and foremost, what was Columbine? This happened, I believe, I want to say maybe 1997, 1998, like I think somewhere, it could have even been like 2001 for all I weigh. I don't think so. I think it was when I was in high school though. But two boys, do I even write their names down? No, we shouldn't even mention them. These two boys had gone into their high school decked out with weapons, not just with guns, but with many, many rounds of ammunition. They had gone into their high school, they had shot it the fuck up, and they had taken many, many lives off of the earth plane. And this is considered to be one of, I think, one of the most horrific school shootings that had ever happened in America's history. So let's see what was going on energetically or behind the veil with all of this. So first and foremost, the boys, whose names I did not even write down, but those two boys were not in their bodies. One of them was consuming way too much porn. It was also of a violent nature, and therefore he was completely desensitized to violence. And what else do we know about somebody that's going to be engaged in watching violent pornography is that they are feeling out of control in some way in their life, and they're choosing to allow their senses to be inundated with this because they're wanting to gain a sense of control by watching men behave this way towards women. So this is already starting to build out a profile of one of these boys, right? He had some sort of issues where he was feeling out of control in his life, had probably some issues with his mother, unfortunately. Or it could have been a carry through from a previous lifetime, but he was feeling out of control, wanting to get onto the other side of having power and control over women. Okay. The other one was so energetically shut down that he was almost nowhere to be found. Now, I'm also going to share with you before I go on that while, at various points while I was trying to look into this, the energy of these two boys were in and out. Very, very spotty. It was kind of like, imagine if you will, you're in a dead zone with your cell phone, and while you're talking to somebody and you're walking, you're kind of like going in and out of service. So you're not able to catch like every word that they're saying. The conversation is going to kind of be spotty for that reason. That is the way that their energy was coming into me. It was very, very spotty. It was in and out. It was honestly weird, and it connects to what I had found out a little bit later on, which kind of explains why it was very, very spotty to me. So I'm going to come back to this. I'm just letting you know that energetically, I've never encountered this before where like the energy was just in and out like this. Usually when I'm able to connect to somebody's energy, they're either very, very vibrant energetically, which means they're still on this side, or their energetic blueprint is a little bit more demure, which means they're on the other side and they've crossed over. And I've kind of likened it to the light of the different kind of light that a torch or a candle would emit. So a torch would emit a big blueprint, a lot of light, right? A candle is still going to be emitting light, but it's going to be much smaller and much softer. So the torch is akin to the energy of a person that's still on this side. The candle is more akin to the energy of somebody that would have crossed over to the other side. But when somebody's energy is kind of like in and out, that is something I have never encountered. And I'm going to touch a little bit more upon that a little bit later on. Now, what I also was getting a deep sense of was, and again, because the energy of the two boys were so hard to kind of track down or stay with is a better way of saying it, I could only kind of get like intermittent exposure to their energy. So I was getting, at the times that I could connect to their energy, very, very, very strong sense that these two boys' families were in the club. There's different facets of the club, right? So there's first and foremost the entertainment portion of the club and who's running it, you know, who is the handlers of the actors and the actresses and the musicians. And then there is the different facets and components that are in business and media and print. And then there's also a facet that's going to be involved with the so-called seemingly normal and regular citizens. And these families were families that were in the club. And even now as I'm talking about it, my guides are shouting at me, tell them. Okay, this was a Masonic family. Now, I know that one of my subs have actually said, so I'm trying to be in abundance of sensitivity. So first and foremost, because one of my subs has shared with me that her family is Masonic, and they have never seen anything like this, right? So this is not to say that every single family that is a Freemason family is going to be involved or even aware that things like this may happen. There are, I believe, 33 levels of the Freemasons. So maybe this is like the 33rd level Freemasons. The families will do something like this. Not all Masons, and not all Freemasons are involved with this or know about this. And I'm sure a great many number of them would not even want to be involved with this if they knew that there was the potential for things like this to happen. So first and foremost, please understand that this is not like where I am casting blame to all Freemasons. I'm not. I am just sharing in this particular case, in this particular family, they were Freemasons, okay? So because this was a Masonic family, the parents were incredibly lackadaisical, or another way of saying that is remarkably easygoing, about what, first and foremost, their children were exposed to, and what was potentially done to their children, and any sort of potential financial compensation or favors that would have elicited and gained them an elevated status. So let's say, for example, some children go to Sunday school. Maybe some children have after-school extracurricular activities. Maybe they go to soccer practice, or they go to football practice, or they go to Sunday school. All sorts of families can put a value on what kind of extracurricular activities they want their children to be put into or exposed to, right? What's of meaning and value to that particular family? This is a family that was not, these are families that were not per se putting their children into Sunday school or physical activities for after school activities. They were put into a different kind of a one. Maybe once or twice a week, maybe once a month for a weekend. They were going off to some sort of facility where things were, they were being shown certain things, or certain things might have been done to them. And I'm not even just saying of a sexual nature. There could have been a lot of things going on in what their minds were being messed with, where they were exposed to MK Ultra mind control. So this is a family that was in the club. They were Masonic. They were very lackadaisical about what their children were being exposed to because they knew what their children were being exposed to. And why were they lackadaisical about it? Because they were in the club, and because of whatever was going to happen and come as a result of this, they were going to gain an elevated status, or there was going to be some sort of financial compensation. I'm going to bet that it's an elevated status because anytime I have looked into this in the past, it's all been for an elevated status. Because money, here's the thing. Money is really fucking hard to hide, right? Unless you're putting it in somebody else's name, but even then they can track it. So if you're gonna pay somebody to do something like this, there's gonna be a paper trail. Unless these are not people that are, what's more meaningful and valuable to them above money? Elevated status. Okay. So that's what's going on here, first and foremost. You wanna know why this happened? These two boys were primed for this. They were made to do this. There were also big dark clouds around the parents. And then as I started to kind of like, the cloud was starting to expand, and I was like, wait, what? It wasn't just around the parents, it was around the city as a whole. There is a lot of dark energy there, which is first and foremost why this town was a vibrational match for this to happen. Especially if there is a large Masonic presence in the town or a lot of Masonic temples in the town. And again, not all Masons know these things are going on. Not all Masons are involved in this, but some of them are. Then, this is where it started to get a little weird, and where when I get to the end of this, you guys are going to be like, no, Faye, go back and do this again. So after I had come to the understanding that there's a dark cloud, not just around the parents, but around the entire town, I started to also, the smoke started to shift. And it wasn't just, for example, shown to me as being like a dark cloud, like a rain cloud, right? The picture was evolving. And what was shown to me is, in addition to the smoke, there was a lot of mirrors there as well, which is another way of saying things are not as they appear. Because the smoke is obfuscating the truth, and the mirrors are misrepresenting what is actually being seen there. Just like if you're in a, you're looking at a funhouse mirror, those mirrors are designed to mess with our appearance, right? Some of them make us look very, very tall. Some of them make us look like we're very, very rotund. Some of them make us look like we're made all out of like a mosaic. We're all shattered glass. It's meant to distort the reality that you are seeing with your own eyes in the mirror. That is what is going on in Columbine. It's all smoke and mirrors. And it's as if there is nothing we really see clearly that was going on there. Nothing is as it seems, and it's almost as if nothing there is really real, or the city, or the townspeople that are living there. So as the smoke was expanding and then it was changing and I was seeing smoke and mirrors, I was getting this kind of like elevated status where I was seeing, hold on, so first and foremost, nothing is real that's there. And then I was starting to see the townspeople that live there almost like they are cardboard cutouts, and they're not real either. And they're put there to create like this illusion of it being like a normal town and a normal city and a normal place, but in reality it's not. Nothing is really real there. It's also an energetic black hole because nothing is real there. Because it's almost like it's not a vibrational match for anything to survive there. Like imagine, if you will, you have gone down to the Sahara Desert and you want to plant a garden. Really? In the Sahara where it never fucking rains? Or imagine you want to turn Antarctica into a rainforest. Really? Antarctica. It's too incongruent. Those things are not aligned. Even in the, for sure in a three-dimensional level, they're not aligned. Energetically, they're just completely different. And I'm sorry, there's a fly that's flying around here. But they're so not aligned. It's like you can't plant a garden in the Sahara. You cannot turn Antarctica into a rainforest. It's the same thing here. This is some sort of an energetic black hole, and because it's an energetic black hole, it's like nothing real can ever survive there, because what does a black hole do? It sucks. Everything that's around it gets sucked into it. Not like everything, right? Like once you pass a certain threshold for the black hole, there's no getting away from it. So if you pass that threshold, you're gonna get fucking sucked into it. That is what the energy of Columbine is like. It's an energetic black hole that everything gets sucked into, and therefore it's not a vibrational match for anything real to thrive. It was at this point where I realized that Columbine is an energetic black hole that I did not want to be in that energy any longer. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to look into it. I didn't want to see what else I was actually going to discover was going on there, other than what I already had, which is it's an energetic black hole. Therefore, it's not a vibrational alignment for anything of a high nature to exist there. Plus, the family was putting their children into after-school programs of some sort in which they were being exposed to certain types of things that would lend themselves perhaps to be exposed to this kind of a outcome. So I hope that answers any questions that you may have about Columbine, and if not, please let me know down below. Now, the next question that I was asked about is true crime TV. And what might this be perhaps doing to all of society in our consummation of it? So this is what was shown to me about true crime TV. It is holding up a mirror for society to see ourselves clearly and what we have become. Because what did we used to have on, it's not, and this is not just attack on true crime TV. First and foremost, I want to make that abundantly clear, because I enjoy true crime, as you guys may have noticed by now, right? Like, I'm always looking into true crime topics. So obviously I enjoy looking into it. I enjoy the intricacies and how the investigators are able to pull different components together, and how then therefore the prosecutors are able to paint this bigger picture in that will hopefully lead to a conviction of a criminal. I think it's very, very compelling. And I think on some level, it really shows the best of human nature and what we're actually capable of. But here's the thing. We're still engaging in some deep, dark shit. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of the video, right? All of the channeling that I was doing at night was of deep, dark nature. And that can take a toll on a person. And if we are also therefore overly consuming it, it can energetically take a toll on us as well. What did we maybe used to have on TV that we probably don't have on TV anymore because it would be considered like misogynistic? But what did we used to have on TV? We used to have beauty pageants on TV. And what did the beauty pageants, what kind of picture of the world were they painting? So it was beautiful young women that were in shape, that had hobbies, and they were sharing their ideals for the kind of world that they wanted to live in. So one could make the argument, look what we've replaced. We have replaced an ideal of nice looking women who take themselves seriously, right? Because these beauty pageants were not like, hi, my name is Trisha. I dance at Tits and Ass, and I'm here because I want to get more tips. It's young women who are in shape. They all have hobbies. I know I'm repeating myself, but they all have hobbies, and they're all in college. They're all professionals. They all have their eyes on the future and the kind of the things that they are pursuing, the kind of world that they want to live in. So we have replaced that ideal of the world with painting the world in a darker light, where we're seeing the very worst of society. It's where people are committing senseless, right? Because once we have the understanding of what's going on behind the veil, there's no such thing as a senseless crime. But imagine for all of the people that are not awake and are not aware, that are consuming this, and they are believing, holy shit, look at all the senseless crimes that are happening. And they're horrific senseless crimes usually too, because what's capturing our attention? It's not like my grandmother went to the dollar store and realized she didn't have $1 for milk, and the cashier said, it's okay, honey, I got you, I'm gonna pay for this today. It's the Murdos of the world. Okay, so it's painting a very, very dark, sordid tale of the kind of world that we live in. So this is therefore for us to see and to wake up. Because the contrast is being created for us, in which we can then ask ourselves, what kind of world are we living in? What kind of world do we want to live in? The choice is ours, and it is starting with our vibration and what we are an energetic match to. So I hope that answers any questions that you have on True Crime TV, and if not, please comment down below. Now, this next question I thought was absolutely fascinating, which is, does spirit world help police solve crimes? And this is what was shown to me. Sometimes they do. But in the case where they do, it is where the police do not know it. And here's why. It can come or seem like it is a spark of inspiration or a spark of insight that a police detective has. It can also seem like it's a sudden idea or something that was overlooked by somebody else, but upon having a second set of eyes on it, they suddenly catch something that was overlooked. It can also be something that was even perceived to have been easy to overlook, ignore, or even explain away as to why it was not caught the first time. So if spirit is helping police solve case, it is not overt. It's not going to be like the police detective is sitting there and he's going to be like, you know the fuck what? My spirit guides just got in touch with me and they told me what happened. It's going to be like maybe they go to the crime scene, they look at the crime scene, and then they are thereafter looking through the crime scene photos and they catch something that they didn't see when they had done the walkthrough. Something like as easy as that to explain away. Like, well, I was just so overwhelmed by what I was seeing that it wasn't until I, took another look at it later on that I was able to catch this. It's not overt. It's sometimes also where a detective can be particularly tuned in to their own intuition and they can allow that to guide them. So it, again, might not be where they're like, oh yeah, my spirit guides are with me, I'm going to allow them to help me. It's just more like there's particular police detectives that are very tuned in and tapped into their own intuition, and that will actually help guide them. However, sometimes cases are not meant to be solved, as that was the particular karma that was being played out on the part of the person whose crime is not solved. So there is no concrete answer as there are so many different variables. Now I'm going to actually skip a couple of pages because that's going to connect us to something else that I was asked to look into. So I want to find that as it does connect quite beautifully. So this one is, here we go, I found it. This one is if spirit world can help police solve crimes. And this was another question that had been asked of me, which is why are some souls missing people, and do their souls choose that, and why do their souls choose that? So this is the answer that had come in on that, which is the idea of a so-called missing person was shown to me as an over-attachment and a correction, therefore, of a previous incarnation. So this would, for example, be where somebody was completely enamored with their body, their appearance, or they had an excess amount of vanity. And that therefore, that would create an imbalance in their soul. So the soul, therefore, in the next incarnation, or even in the same incarnation, could choose then to balance their own soul's energy out by choosing to experience the loss of their body, right? Because they're considered to be a missing person and maybe even presumed to be dead in some cases. So this is where they would be balancing out their own soul's energy by experiencing the loss of their body for their soul, therefore, then to evolve and to understand that their physical three-dimensional body not being found does not impact the soul at all. So this is essentially a rebalancing stemming from an over-attachment to something in the three-dimensional for the soul to learn is not really real. It's like, God damn, I'm so fucking beautiful. Maybe they've had many lifetimes they were so fucking beautiful. It's not real. This is, if you will, the house that inhabits, the house that the soul inhabits. But what's real? The soul, because it's eternal. The body dies. So if there is a soul that is particularly over-attached, they have the ability to rebalance it. Now, this is also actually going to seamlessly connect us to the next topic that I had looked into, which is, can souls help their bodies be found? Very interesting. Here's the answer. Sometimes. But if they do, that is a further lesson for themselves to realize just how attached they are to their three-dimensional bodies. See how that so beautifully connects to the one we were just looking at? They, of course, still have free will and can choose to desire their body being found, but here's the thing. Also, that once they're out of their body, the human desires are also gone. And what does that mean? I would say every single human feeling, emotion, or desire that exists all disappear when we cross out of our bodies. There's only one that remains, and that's love. So for a soul to have such a strong desire that I want to help the police find my body so it doesn't remain to be a missing body forever, it's actually kind of incongruent with what remains of a person's soul once they cross out of their body. All of that is gone. The only thing that remains is love. Fear, anger, jealousy, hatred, desire, they're gone once you cross out of your body. So, if therefore a soul, once they were out of their body, would have such a strong desire to aid the police in finding their body, would indicate a very, very strong attachment. And an attachment like that is so strong that that would then therefore be a carry-through from previous lifetimes. And it's kind of like, if you will, fibers on a rope that are fortified and refortified. So let's say, imagine in one incarnation, somebody is so attached to their body that the rope first starts out this way. And then in their next incarnation, because they're still so attached, the rope is now fortified and it's become that thick. And then in their next incarnation, oh shit, I lost the page. No, I didn't. Okay. Then in the next incarnation, the rope is further fortified that it's this thick. Then it's this thick. Then it's as thick as the body. In each of the subsequent incarnations, where there is such a strong attachment, it's going to make and add to the fibers on a rope, fortifying it and refortifying it, making it stronger and stronger and stronger, to the point where even once that soul has crossed out of their body, the attachment to the body, even though it's been any number of different bodies that they've inhabited in which it has been fortified and refortified, but it's where the attachment to their bodies has been so strong that it carries through so deeply that they then would there still have the desire to have their body be found. Thus, why this would be a karmic rebalancing to the strong sense of attachment that they have to their body. Like, hold the fuck on. If you are, after all of these incarnations, so still attached to the body that you want to aid the police in finding it, that is a surefire way in letting that soul know you are too fucking attached. So, there was the original attachment from one lifetime that had initially led to them being called missing, and in this lifetime and their desire to be found would be further evidence of how deep that attachment would go. So, from an elevated vantage point on the other side, however, my guess is that the soul would let go with the absence of the human attachment. Again, unless it was so completely fortified and refortified and refortified and refortified, in which case they would have the opportunity to remain a missing person for good. Again, they have free will. They can be like, no, I want my body to be found. I don't give a flying fuck. Or they could be like, you know what, I've had so many lifetimes. I want to give this one a try. And I want to have the experience of realizing that my body will not be found. And then through that experience, they could come to understand my soul really is eternal. My soul really does live on. I really don't need that body to be found because it's not even real. It's like, imagine somebody being so attached to all their shoes that they can't throw any of their shoes away because they're like, where would my foot go? The foot doesn't go anywhere. Your foot doesn't vanish just because you throw away a pair of shoes. Your foot remains. It's kind of like that. But it's where somebody has become so overly attached to the fact that their foot has to be in a pair of shoes, they can't throw a single pair of shoes out. It's kind of like that. So I hope that that answers your question on, first and foremost, can souls help in their bodies be found? And as well as why some souls are missing, and can they change that? As well as the original question a couple of pages back, which is, does spirit help police solve cases? And if not, please comment down below. Another great and interesting question, which is, does spirit see police as responsible for the way that crimes are handled? So go back first and foremost to the Rebecca Zahau case. The police knew what was going on, knew what it was saying, and they classified it as a crime other than what it actually was to obfuscate what was actually going on there. So apply this to something like that, which is, does spirit see police as responsible for the way that certain crimes can be handled? This is the answer that had come in. No. And here's why. Spirit does not judge us in that way. Spirit holds space for us, all of us, each and every one of us, irrespective of our choices here on earth. That means that spirit holds space for perpetrators of crimes as well. We are all welcome in the spirit world. We all have a seat at the table, no matter how we show up at it. So I hope that answers your question about that, and if not, please comment down below. Now, the next one I was asked to look into, this is another fucking wild one, is the Challenger spaceship, which, for anybody who does not know, there was obviously a spaceship named the Challenger that in 1986 had exploded a few seconds after takeoff. Not like 5 seconds, right? It wasn't like they took off and bam, they exploded. It was like it was already taken off. It was already up in the sky. You could already watch it starting to go, and then it had exploded. And what made it even more horrific was the fact that they had, for the first time ever, had taken a non-professionally trained astronaut onto it. So they had done like a nationwide search where they were looking for a candidate that they were going to train to go into space with the, I believe, other 4 astronauts that were going up into space. Okay. So what made it even more devastating and notable, and what had this plastered all the fuck over the world, was the fact that I mean, not that one life is more meaningful than any of the other ones, right? It's not like, oh my God, like this. But it was just to say that it was like a regular pedestrian. Like, oh my God, how remarkable. Like this regular Okay, what was really going on there? Let's not get into hysterics here, okay? Again, I didn't write down any of the names. The teacher, the so-called regular pedestrian, her energy came into me right away. Smiling, just as she was in the photo that was used of her, and why this was plastered everywhere. Because who was she? She was a teacher. She was a mom of 2. She was like a regular, everyday kind of woman. And there's that famous photo of her smiling, looking all, that was plastered the fuck everywhere. So when her energy had come into me right away, she was smiling just as she had in that photo. And she had shared with me that she was the missing and final piece in the piece de resistance to assuring that the devastation and destruction caused by this rocket ship exploding would be achieved. And it was done and designed to so thoroughly gut America. Because it was her, smiling and excited, and so other than the poised astronauts, and not like the other ones, that was going to guarantee this being a success. Now, what has come out since then was that I believe it's the makers of something called the O-ring. And these are the O-rings that I believe went around the rocket part itself, where the engines would be fired up and it would propel them up. So these were faulty and defective O-rings. And it had actually been shown that there was communication in which they had been warned that these O-rings were defective, and should the launch day be when the temperature had dropped below a certain degree, it could cause an explosion. They absolutely fucking knew about this. They knew. They knew that these O-rings were faulty. And what happened on that particular morning? I think it had been like raining or something, or it was definitely in January. It was cold. Like, what the fuck are they? Okay, the O-rings are defective. Why don't we take off in January when it's cold? Okay. First and foremost, just understand it was all by design. Why? They knew the O-rings were faulty. Okay. It was a cold day. Okay. Nothing to see here. So yes, they absolutely knew that those O-rings were faulty, but they also had no interest in fixing them, because then it would not allow the Challenger to actually explode. So this was also shown to me as being a classic case of misdirection. Look here, not there. And what were they trying to divert us away from? Everyone was expecting them to be in the rocket ship, that nobody thought to look for them anywhere else. Because everyone thought they were there, and then subsequently everyone thought that they were dead. Oh, and it must be if we saw them going into the rocket ship, and it must mean because we saw them going up into the rocket ship, and we saw them harnessed in, and we saw them taking off, it must mean that they were actually there. So, because of this classic case of misdirection, and everyone assuming them to be in the rocket ship, nobody thought to look for them anywhere else. Not then, and also not since then. It was all smoke and mirrors, and they were also very well paid for their participation in it. They're all alive to this day. The teacher, who came to me smiling, showed me that she was from a Masonic family. And it was considered to be a huge honor to be involved in this. To pretend to be dead. And what else? Not just the rocket ship exploding. What else was she participating in? To pretend to be dead and to walk away from her family. And her being a teacher was really a 2-for-1, because why was she specifically chosen? Yeah, she was a Mason, but why else? Like, out of every person who had actually applied, was she the only Mason? Maybe she was implanted. But why did it even make her that much more enticing? Because first and foremost, she was like a regular everyday person Thus, it captured the attention of the world, and in addition, it left the kids in her class and kids all around the fucking world traumatized and scarred for life because their beloved teacher had died in such a freak way. So this is kind of like they took a playbook out of Disney. They took a page out of the playbook of Disney. What does Disney do? These are supposed to be fairy tales for kids. Why are horrific things happening to the parents? Mufasa in, what's that? The Lion King. The parents in Frozen. Go back through all of them. Horrific things have happened to the main character's parents. These are supposed to be fairy tales. Why the fuck are fairy tales introducing something so morbid to children? You want to scar people for life? That's how you do it in their young and impressionable years. So they not only were able to do that with all of the students of this teacher's class, but it also kind of like implanted this subtle fear in all the kids in every school. Oh my God, could something like this happen to my teacher that I love too? Now, she had also directed me to look into the fact that two of the crew members, the so-called real crew members, that were the trained astronauts, two of the crew members were twins. So when I had actually looked into it, I was like, okay, I wonder why she's directing me to look into this. So then I had looked up what percentage of the population is a twin. And it's 2% of the entire world population has a twin. 2%. Now, whittle that down even more so and say, what is the percentage of likelihood that two of the crewmates would be a twin? I was like, okay, this is, I see where I kind of was starting to see where she was directing me to look into this. What are the mathematical odds that two of the crew members would have a twin, would be a twin? And then that invited me to fall down some rabbit holes, and I actually had found a video that somebody had put together of these crewmates, all of them, even the teacher, lining them up with people who have remarkably similar sounding names. Like maybe it's probably even the same name, maybe it's just like missing like the middle name. And then the person had put like side-by-side photos of them, of their crew photo when, you know, because they always have the crew photos of the astronauts going up into space. So they would put a side-by-side of the crew photo of what the person looked like with how they look now, having a job someplace else. Like two of them are like college professors. One of them is like a businessman. Okay. You can see, even taking into account aging, it's like, okay, and then the two that had twins. It's like the same fucking person. So this was a ruse that was all done to debilitate the United States of America, while all of the astronauts that were involved, that did live, all of them lived, went on to do other things, and they were incredibly well compensated for it. They might have actually all been Masonic families, but was shown specifically about the teacher was that she was a Mason. Because it's kind of like a big stretch to be thinking like, really all five of them would be okay with it? Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what kind of training astronauts go through, right? Like, maybe some of the training they go through is actually MK Ultra. Maybe they're actually able to come to understand who is open to this anyway. Like, who is of a more three-dimensional nature, and they're like, yeah, sure, whatever, I don't mind. I'll disappear. My family will think I'm dead. I'll scar the country. I don't give a shit. Just give me, I'm all about the bottom line, you know? So that's what I have for you on the Challenger. Please comment down below if you have any further questions on that. Now, the next one that I don't think anyone actually asked me to look into this. This was something that I was like, oh, I guess I'm doing true crime. I'll look into some of the things I'm interested in as well. So there was the so-called Craigslist killer that was responding to advertisements on Craigslist for, I don't think they were like sex workers. I think they were like, you know, like personal like masseurs, people that would come and like give you a massage. So I think he had actually robbed 2 of them and he had killed a 3rd. So let's see what was going on there. His name was Phillip Markoff, by the way. Phillip Markoff. Phillip Markoff, the so-called Craigslist killer. And this was only a couple of years ago, maybe like 2015, anywhere between 2015 and 2018, I believe. All right. So first and foremost, his energy did not want to at first come in. So I just kind of sat there and I was like, it's not like he's not coming to the door and he's not letting me in. It's like he was on the other side of the door and he was saying to me, go away, I don't want to open the door. So I just kind of stayed there for a second and then he was like, okay, fine, I'll open the door. And what he had actually shared with me is that first and foremost, what he had actually done was he begged me not to read his energy for the sake of his parents, who have suffered tremendously. He said, please, please do not read my energy. I'll talk to you, but don't read my energy. He also at that point would not share what had happened other than to say what had happened with the crimes that were committed. He was arrested at some point. So he was sharing with me that his time in prison had sucked the life out of him and left him feeling that there was no way out. So therefore he had chosen to, while he was in prison, take himself off the earth plane. He also had said to me the reason he did not want me to look into his energy is because he did not want to be remembered for what he was accused of doing, but rather wishes to be remembered for who he was before then. And as you guys, I hope, know by now, if somebody has asked me not to read their energy, I don't. It's unethical, it's bad juju. So I did not look into his energy any further, and I hope that that answers any questions that you did or did not have about the so-called Craigslist killer. And if not, please comment down below. This next one I find to be absolutely fucking fascinating also, which is what happened to Shelly Miscavige. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, if it's Miscavige or a Miscavige. Who is Shelly Miscavige? She is the wife of the current, he's not the founder, it's the guy who's currently like running Scientology. And his name is, I think David Miscavige? I think so. And I'm going to use Miscavige and Miscavige equal. I'm an equal opportunity wrong pronouncer of names. So 50% of the time I'll have it right and 50% of the time I'll have it wrong. Okay, so she had disappeared and there's been a number of people that actually been very concerned about her. One of them is Leah Remini, who was a Scientologist for many years and had left Scientology. And she's been the one who's always like, where's Shelly? And the police authorities have even gotten involved and they said, she's fine, there's nothing to worry about. And then people like Leah Remini would say, okay, so if she's fine, why can't I talk to her? If she's fine, why can't you show me evidence of her being fine? What happened to Shelly? So let's talk about that. They shattered her mind. And who is they? Scientology. It was shown to me as, if you remember the Looney Tunes from the cartoon, there was, and now I think about it, I'm like, of all the things to choose on a cartoon, why this? That's an aside. But you know on Looney Tunes, they have the black and white like this, and it's spinning around and around and around at the, I believe, the beginning and the end of every episode. Okay, hello mind control first and foremost, but it was shown to me that way. So it was the Looney Tunes spiral and her voice saying over and over again, quote, hello? Hello? Is anyone there? Hello? End quote. She is seeking. She is searching for other people. And the spiral spinning all around her. So this is indicating to me some extreme and severe level of hypnosis or mind control. And once I had come to that conclusion, it was shown to me, correct, she is completely lost to herself because of what they did to her. She is completely shattered and stuck inside of herself mentally. This was done for two purposes. First and foremost, she has all the goods on David Miscavige, and she knows where all the proverbial bodies are buried. So this was done to keep her silent forever. So if they wanted to keep her silent forever, why not just kill her? Here's the second reason this was done. David Miscavige is sadistic, and he wanted her to suffer. To kill her would have given her some sort of a relief, but from where he sits playing God, that her mind is shattered, she's completely locked inside of herself. This is perfectly right. This is perfectly just. And from his point of view, it was shown to me as right as drinking a glass of lemonade on a hot summer day while rocking in a hammock. So he is in fact very much a sadist. And he did this to his wife because killing her would give her relief. He wanted her to fucking suffer. Who wants the right to suffer? Fucking sadist. So Shelly is very much alive. However, she is very much shattered mentally and completely lost to herself. So I hope that answers any questions that you have on Shelly Miscavige or Miscavige, and if not, please comment down below. Now, the next one that I was asked to look into is specifically calling out 3 cities, which is Chicago, San Francisco, and New Orleans, and the high rates of crimes in these cities. So what's going on behind the veil? So, simply put, these locations are an energetic match for the citizens and for the crimes that are being committed there. It is a combination, if you will, of the so-called ingredients and the right temperature of the oven to cook and to produce these outcomes. What are the outcomes? Crimes. These places are then, therefore, they are energetically locked in. As those that are not an energetic match for it will choose to move out. They'll be like, okay, this city has gone to hell in a handbasket, peace out. And those that are a vibrational match will continue to stay there, thus further compounding the current energies that reside there. So it's like the oven is still at the right temperature, the ingredients are still perfectly combined, and so you're going to continue to have the same outcome. However, what was also shown to me is that as the current energies on Earth continue to rise, the energy of these cities will have to rise as well. And also, like most things in the world, everything that is corrupt and everything that is broken is being driven to the surface at this time. So, while it will appear to be getting worse, it is actually only where the energies are being exposed, finally being exposed. They're also being purged, which is then in turn going to make room for fresh new energies to come in. So I hope that answers your question on not just these particular cities, because I think we can make a case that there's, for sure, I don't want to, be a negative vibrational match to the city I live in, but certainly we could make a case that any great number of cities in the world right now have gone to fucking hell. So it's not just necessarily Chicago, San Francisco, and New Orleans, but it's any city, right? And why is it happening? One way of saying it is the energy is being compounded because those that are not energetically aligned are going to move out. Therefore, it's locking that negative energy in. But the second way of saying it is everything is being driven to the surface right now. We are now getting the opportunity to see just how broken and corrupt all of these governments have been. And that's going to make room for new, fresh energies to come in because, ready or not, the energy on Earth is rising. Okay. Now, this next one is also very, very interesting. And I was asked to look into if a celebrity is cloned, where are the guardian angels positioned? Are the guardian angels staying with the origin point of the person, or are they going to go and be with the clone if the clone is being utilized? And this is what was shown to me. The guardian angels will stay with the original body. But not for the body, because that is three-dimensional. They are there for the soul and spirit of the person. But here's the thing. Since spirit does not recognize a clone, as clones do not come from God, that is why, and a clone is man-made, that's why they are residing with the original. So it's not that they're residing with the original because the original is the original body, right? It has nothing to actually do with the body. It has to do with the fact that the soul resides in the original person and not in any of the subsequent clones. So guardian angels do not recognize something that is synthetic, a synthetic human. So they're going to continue to reside where the soul resides, which is where? In the original body. So spirit stays and resides with all of God's children. And if the original is gone, and if only the subsequent clones remain, then they have no guardian angels around them at all. So I hope that answers your question about clones and guardian angels. And if not, please comment down below. The next one is, are corrupt politicians and or police responsible for crimes? This is what was shown to me. Unless they themselves, the politicians or the corrupt police, are the ones that have actually committed the crimes, no. Why? The perpetrator is the one that actually committed the crime. And the perpetrator had free will to commit it or not. And also, I'm going to remind you, they had free will, but most likely they were also contracted on a soul level to commit that crime. So what the corrupt politicians and police are, however, responsible for are co-creating, and this very intentionally came in together, not just creating, but co-creating. They are responsible for co-creating a vibrational environment that is lower, denser energy, that would then comprise the existence of having corrupt politicians and or police. So in essence, they are also a vibrational match for the lower, denser energy that they are already in. Hence the term co-creating. They're already in it, so they're just further continuing to create it. So in order for things to change, they must therefore have some level of awareness to raise themselves out of this environment that they are in, to then continue to, is that the fly on me? To then continue to raise themselves out of it and to start to change it. So I hope that that answers any questions that you have on corrupt police or politicians being responsible for crimes. And if not, please comment down below. Okay, Now I'm going to skip some pages because there's some other topics that I had looked into that either are videos or are not yet videos, such as the Vatican, which is a video that is up as a members only video. Then I also have, oh, here we go. Okay. So this next question came in is if I can look into the energy of the movie The Sound of Freedom. And this is what was shown to me. So first and foremost, actually, you know what? I'm going to save this for the end because I looked into two things, this and one other that come together, and I want to end with the other one. Therefore, I'm going to put this on hold, and I will come back to it. I promise I'll come back to it. So the next one I'm going to look into. Actually, I'll dog ear the page so I know to come back to it. The next one that I was asked to look into is a woman by the name of Michelle Davis. She is unintentionally very well known right now, even it's not by her name. She is the woman that had gone crazy. That's a judgy word. Let me rephrase that. She's the woman that appeared to have a notable episode on an airplane in which she was saying, "I want off of this fucking plane. That guy sitting next to me is not human." So what actually happened there? And this is what was shown to me. So first and foremost, she was very amenable to me connecting to her energy. And she shared with me she still cannot believe what she saw. The public spectacle that she has turned into, it pales in comparison. And she doesn't care at all about it, the public spectacle that she's turned into. And this has completely shifted her worldview, and therefore she doesn't care anymore if anybody believes her or not. And once she had actually shared this with me, she was like, "But hold on a fucking second. If you came here to mock me, I don't care if you're here to mock me, but I'm also not going to open my energy up to you anymore." So it was at this time that I had assured her that my intention is completely pure. I did not come to mock her. I only simply wanted to come to understand what had happened on the plane. And it was at this time that she had said she doesn't have words for it. She's like, "I can't even tell you what I saw. I don't even have words for it." So I was like, "Okay, can I ask you some questions?" And she's like, so I asked her, was it a reptile in human form? She said no. I was going to do like process of elimination. Okay, let's see if we can, okay, just because I have an understanding of these things and maybe she doesn't have the right words for it because it's not something that she's aware of as in the realm of possibility. So I'll just kind of like throw some things at her and let's see if we can get to the bottom of it. So no, it was not a reptile in human form. Was it a shapeshifter? No. Did it look like an alien? No. Did it look like a demon? No. The closest she could get to it was a monster, but it was not a monster because it was a monster in human form. Like when you think of like a monster, what are you thinking of? Maybe like the monsters in, what was that movie? Monster Inc., right? Like they're big, they're blue, they're fluffy, they have like one eye in the middle of their head. So they didn't really look that way to her. They were a monster in human form, and since she didn't know how else to like clarify that, that is why she had said that it was not human. Frustrating as that is. Now, I then asked her if it was okay if I could see what she had seen through her eyes, and she had indicated it was okay for her if I felt I had the stomach for it. And this is what I saw through her eyes. So first and foremost, it was not human. There's a reason she was saying it's not human, right? It's not human. So this is what I did see. First and foremost, the skin was very, very dark gray, and it looked old, but it was taut, and it's not loose the way that we would imagine skin to be on an old person, right? So like when skin is on an old person, it tends to be loose, it tends to hang, right? It's like wrinkly, it's leathery. So the skin on this being was dark gray, and it was leathery, but it was taut. So like imagine, if you will, someone got like a really, really bad facelift where they just pulled the skin back just enough so that it wasn't loose anymore, but not so much that you couldn't see that the skin itself was still old. It was kind of like that. So dark gray, old looking but taut. And it also had incredibly freaky, long fingers. Holy fucking hell. Like, I have small hands and I have small fingers. Okay. Imagine my finger and the pen was the length almost of the finger, a little bit shorter than this. Fucking freaky. These long fucking fingers, okay? It was also wearing some sort of like a head covering. So where the head was a little bit further back and in the shadows, so I couldn't see the entirety of the head, but I could see that the eyes were first of all black, and they were sunken deep back into the head. So like imagine, if you will, like our eyes are not sunken that far back. Imagine if the eyes were like back the fuck into the head, like by the ears. So there would be like this tunnel leading up to seeing the eye because it was so far set back into the head. It was incredibly freaky. I'm not even gonna lie. It was freaky. And it did also have a human form, but it was definitely not human. So I kind of understand why she kept saying it's not human, it's not human. It's not fucking human. She doesn't know what else to say about it because it doesn't look like a monster. It just looks like something in a human form. Like it has the shape and the body of a human, but it's not human. So like she didn't, and she was so completely in shock. Her like words were failing her. She didn't know how else to like quantify it or what else to say about it other than it's not human. Now, it is also, I'm going to share with you, it's unlike anything else that I have seen before. Because I have seen extraterrestrials, right? Like I have seen like what entities look like on the astral realm. It's unlike anything that I have ever personally seen before. And it had, because now I was seeing it through her eyes, but I was also seeing it through the eyes of an energy reader. And this thing had an aura and energy around it of wrongness, like it didn't belong here. And it didn't belong here because it's not from here. So I was like, okay, this is interesting. So now that I was able to see what it was and read the energy of it and understand that it's not from here and the energy of it is wrong, what the fuck is it doing here? This is what was shown to me. First and foremost, it did not mean her any harm. It wasn't revealing itself to her because it planned on hurting her or anything like that. It didn't like reveal itself because it wanted to scare her. What had actually happened is that this being was just as surprised that she was able to see it as it was at being seen. Because it is used to not being seen, and therefore it hadn't worried about it for quite a long time. Another way of saying this is, let's say, because our three-dimensional eyes are quite limited with what we can see, we might be walking around a great number of, and not to say this to freak anybody out, let's say, this is a hypothetical. We're walking around a great number of entities at any given time, but because we're limited with what our three-dimensional eyes can see, we don't actually see them. But they're there, we just don't see them. It's like a microscopic spider. It could be on the wall at any given time. It's there, you just don't see it, right? So this entity was so used to not being seen that it didn't even like worry about that it was ever going to get to be seen. But it's an entity, and it never worried about being seen. So it was just kind of like going about its day, living its life, not really being worried that it was going to be seen. It's like, you think that microscopic spider is worried that you're going to see it and kill it? It's a microscopic spider. It was Yes, so it didn't mean her any harm. It was just as surprised to be seen as she was to actually see it. And she was very much hoping that this person, the entity was very much hoping that she would get off the plane and the whole thing would be forgotten. It's kind of blown up a little bit, but also it kind of blew up in a way where people are like, you know, throwing shade at her. She's crazy, right? Right? Because that's kind of the way things of an extrasensory perception are perceived by those people that don't have those perceptions. She was in the process, this Michelle Davis was in the process of what? Energetically upgrading. One of her new gifts and abilities had come in, which is what? Maybe it's where her crown chakra was blown open. And she was therefore able to have an experience of seeing things that other people don't see. Maybe it's where the three-dimensional eyes that she was using now additionally have the new gift and ability of clear, there's really no such thing for here's the thing. Clairvoyant is like seeing into the future. Claircognizant is knowing things without knowing how we know them. There's not really like a specific thing for seeing things that our three-dimensional eyes don't quite see. There's not like a label for it. But as she was starting to energetically ascend herself, this is one of her gifts and abilities that had come in. However, it has so completely freaked her out that she's probably going to work really fucking darn hard to shut this gift and ability down. Which for anybody else who's here, you know when your gifts and abilities started to come in and no one else the fuck around you got it, you were like, okay, it's me, I'm crazy, I'm shutting this down. It's going to kind of be interesting to see what happens with her in the future, where she's going to shut it down for good, or if she's going to continue to ascend and raise and accept this inside of her, and then to continue to see these things on an ongoing basis, because this is a gift and ability that she has. Now, if this thing was so used to not being seen, why the fuck was it there and why was it being seen? Because first and foremost, it is an entity from some other dimension that did come here, but however, it is now stuck here because all of the portals have been sealed, at least temporarily. They don't want any dark entities coming in, as Earth is now in her energetic glow up. And they also don't want the dark entities to leave Earth because then they will not be held accountable. So they have temporarily sealed all of the portals. So this entity is now stuck here. So if you are ever on a plane or in a coffee shop and you see an entity that looks like this, you will know what it is. It's just stuck here. It means you no harm. So I hope that answers your question about the woman on the airplane who lost her cookies. And if not, please comment down below. Now I gotta skip some more pages because this is a video I had recently done on the Gilgo Beach serial killer. Here's the next one. Okay. I'm not even gonna lie. When this one, it was just a name and I didn't connect it to anything. It was so wild, actually. This is how you know you're meant to look into something. So someone had requested this particular topic. And then I was talking on the phone with a friend of mine, and as friends sometimes do, we were kind of, she wanted to see, like, how's your YouTube channel doing? What's going on with it? And I had shared with her that actually a lot of my viewers and subscribers and now members are actually from Australia. Hi, guys. So she was like, wow, that's so wild and that's so cool. She's like, you know what case you should actually look into for your Australian followers? And I was like, no, who? She's like, it's the dingo ate my baby lady. And I was like, the what now? She's like, yeah, there was this case in the 1980s. There was a woman who had claimed a dingo ate her baby. And I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. I'm gonna have to look into this. Now, I didn't know that this was actually a topic that you guys had requested because you guys had given me the name of this woman. What was the woman's name? Lindy Chamberlain. Lindy Chamberlain is the woman who claimed the dingo ate her baby. Let's explore what actually happened, because a few years later, she was like arrested for murder. She went to jail. So this woman has not had an easy go. First and foremost, she lost her 9-week-old baby. Okay, so let's start there. She had a 9-week-old baby, I believe by the name of, I think I wrote this, I think Azaria. Unless I can't read my own handwriting. I think the baby's name was Azaria, a 9-week-old little baby daughter. And the family, I think they had 2 other kids at the time, and her husband had driven like 9 hours to like a nature reserve, and they were camping. And the baby was asleep in the tent with one of her other kids, or maybe both of her other kids, and she had seen a dingo, which is kind of like a big wild dog. She had seen a dingo leaving the tent. And then she had gone into the tent and looked, and her baby was gone. Okay. So as soon as I had connected to her energy, she shared with me what a nightmare this has all been for her. She also feels like all this time later, this is 40 years later, I think this was 1982, 40 fucking years later. 40 years later, all this fucking time later, she still has not fully recovered. Her 9-week-old baby had disappeared. She had seen that dingo, or what we would consider maybe to be a wild dog, running away from the tent. She was frantic. Now, after this had all happened, the baby was missing, and they went to get help. She shared with me that the police had sent them away from the campsite. They had to drive like another, I think like 9 hours or something like that to get home. She was leaving without her baby. Imagine how this poor fucking woman felt. Okay. She was leaving without her baby. They were basically sent away from the campsite so that the police could look for the baby. And this was shown to me as her being in some sort of a bad dream. She felt like she was locked into a bad dream. None of it felt real to her. She was sleep deprived. Her hormones were all over the place. And then she had experienced what she felt to be a real lack of compassion for what she and her family were going through. And it was absolutely horrific, and she wanted to die at that time. The only thing that kept her here were her kids and the hope that they would find her baby. Now, it was at this time that she asked me rhetorically, because she had gone on to do an interview on TV about this ordeal and had received a lot of criticism for the way in which she was behaving on TV. So she asked me rhetorically, how would a new mother who was missing her baby and was shell-shocked by the experience with absolutely no experience in front of a camera, how was she supposed to act? That would have been somehow deemed more appropriate. She was completely traumatized. How did people want her to act? She was acting weird? Okay, her life at that time was weird. How was she supposed to act? She also had shared with me that at that time, there was so little awareness about trauma and the so-called 5 Fs. And what are, 1, 2, or the 4, I think the 4, I think she meant 4 Fs, the 4 Fs. And what are the 4 Fs? Flight, fight, fawn, freeze. So when somebody is experiencing a trauma, one of 4 things are going to happen to them. They're going to go into fight mode and they're going to fight, or they're going to flight mode and they're going to run, or they're going to freeze, meaning they will be completely like frozen, like their brain will be functioning, but their body just will not operate, or they will fawn. Fawn is, I think, faint. So people will run, fight, faint, or freeze. She was in trauma, and there was so little awareness of it back then. She was stuck in this fucking nightmare without her baby, and she went on TV, and then people were like, oh no, she's acting weird. How did people want her to act? Now, there was so little awareness about the four F's and how they cause people to behave. So she says, even now, putting anyone on TV when they are experiencing a trauma and then judging for them, it is just cruel. And this is done for the entertainment of the audience and to get viewers, and it is never in the best interest of the family or the people that are actually experiencing the trauma. She also had shared with me that she was hardly sleeping. She was trying to put one foot in front of the other, trying to put the pieces of her life back together, and then she was arrested when she was 7 months pregnant. She was arrested only to then have her baby while she was incarcerated and to have her baby be put into foster care. She said this was the lowest point in her life, and she truly contemplated suicide. This was even lower than when as the 9-week-old baby had disappeared. This was even lower than that because she had just had another baby. She was re-traumatized by the system. She had another baby, and that baby, yes, she knew the baby was alive and well. They took that baby away from her and it was put into foster care. It's amazing this woman didn't commit suicide. So this was the lowest point in her life in which she truly did contemplate suicide, and that if not for being locked up and not having access to anything that she could have killed herself with, if not for that, she would have killed herself. Now, she also had shared that her life has been a spectacle and there is no amount of money she can ever be paid to make amends to what was done to her and her family. And I think she did receive some sort of a settlement because they never found her baby, but it was later deemed that the dingo did in fact take her baby and she did not kill her baby, because what had people been saying at that time? This was satanic ritual abuse and it was a satanic ritual murder. She killed her baby. That's what people were saying. So she did receive some sort of a settlement. I don't know how much it was, but she is saying there's no amount of money in the world that could have made this up to her. And while she shares she would not now commit suicide, she welcomes death so that she can see her baby Azaria again. So I hope that answers your question on Lindy Chamberlain, or the woman who said the dingo ate my baby. And if not, please comment down below. I don't know if we're gonna go over 3 hours or if we're gonna keep it under 3 hours. We're gonna see. We got still some juicy stuff to get through. So let's keep going. Now, the next topic I was asked to look into is the Cecil Hotel. I could be completely making this up because, again, I don't research it. I kind of believe that the Cecil Hotel is a hotel in downtown LA where there have been a great number of weird ass shit that has been going on there. So let's see why the Cecil Hotel has the reputation for all of the weird ass shit going on there. Now, when I had looked into it, all I can see around it is dark smoke. Very hazy energy. And I heard the words come into me and say it's on a ley line. I didn't know what a ley line was, so I asked what a ley line is, and I was told that it's similar to an energetic convergence point. However, it's not where things cross in or out, but it is one that has a particular pull or energy around it, and that energy can influence the actions, behaviors, and vibrations of those around it. Now, for anybody that is new here and you are not familiar with the term an energetic convergence point, that's kind of what I've termed it. I don't actually know what it's called. But an energetic convergence point is, if you will, a intersection. But it's not an intersection of cars, it's an intersection of energies. And it can kind of be akin to a intersection, and I'm going to draw pictures. because some of us are visual, right? And it will help to have a visual representation. Okay, I don't know if you can see the lines, but I made lines on this piece of paper and I made it in, I don't know what fucking shape this is. It's the shape of like a stop sign, okay? So an energetic convergence point is, if you will, an energetic intersection between all of these different lines that I have just made darker. But now imagine, if you will, these are not they're not lines, but they're doors. And since the middle point is this energetic intersection, and these are all doors, you can have a being or an entity open this door and they can cross out of this door. And that's why, for example, you can have places on Earth where people see things that they don't belong, like the so-called Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest. The Pacific Northwest is a beautiful location with lots of natural greenery and trees and nature, and it is therefore what? An energetic convergence point, and the Bigfoot were able to open their door here and cross into the door here, which is, this is where they came from, this is where they ended up, in the Pacific Northwest. The entity that we had just spoken about a moment ago on the airplane that the woman had lost her shit over, so he was an entity, and at the point that these energetic convergence points were open, he might have come from here, and he crossed over into here. This is where he came from, this is where he ended up in our reality. He doesn't belong here. But most of us can't see him, so he was just going about his business, not really being used to being seen. This is an energetic convergence point. It's kind of like a portal, but not, because it's energy and it's not, like a lot of the portals are actually not a intersection. It's like a portal would be more akin to two doors. This would be a portal. Somebody is coming from here, they open up this door, they go through this, and they exit on the other side here. That's a portal. It's a little bit different than an energetic convergence point. So, the energy by the Cecil Hotel, it is on something called a ley line, which is akin to an energetic convergence point. However, it's not where things can cross in and out, but it is something, a particular place that has a pull or energy around it. And what does that pull or energy do? It therefore will influence the actions, behaviors, and vibration of the people that are around it. So the location of the Cecil Hotel happens to be on a particularly low vibration ley line. And thus, all sorts of bizarre activities happen at it and around it because, what? The ley line has influenced, and it's influencing those that are there, but also, what are the kind of people that are going to be attracted to it? People that are of a similar energetic vibration. So it is both attracting these weird kind of guests, and then once they are there, those weird kind of energetic matches are being influenced by the energy of the ley line. So I hope that answers your question about what the Cecil Hotel is, and if not, please comment down below. The next topic that I was asked to look into, I'm going to skip some pages because this is for an upcoming video that I'm going to be doing maybe next week. This is where the Kardashians are going to get their own freestanding video. Because yes, I did discuss them in a AMA, but there's so much more to explore with them. They're like the gift that keeps on giving. And then here, excuse me, here is the Unabomber, which he already got his own freestanding video. Excellent. I recommend going back and watching it if you haven't yet seen it. The Royal Reboot, which is a member video. And I think we're at the last two topics, actually. This is very exciting. No. I have I have 3 more topics. Okay. We might go a little bit over 3 hours. I'm perfectly okay with that if you are. Now, this next one is on someone who is referred to as the so-called Black Dahlia, which is a woman that had gone missing and was later, her body was found a couple of days later, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Short. Now, this is a unsolved crime back in, I believe, the 1920s. And she had gone missing on January, I believe, 9th, and then her body was found, did I write it down? 5 days later or so. So maybe like January 14th or 15th, something around there. Now, what is particularly notable about her is not the fact that she had been missing for 5 days, but it was the way her body was found those 5 days or so later. So first and foremost, she had been cut in half at her waist. She had been drained of all of her blood. And then her body was posed, I believe she was even found like by a dump, like not in a dumpster, but like by a dumpster, like outside of like a warehouse or a factory or something like that. Her body had been posed in a very suggestive manner. Again, keeping in mind that her body was cut in half. So the lower portion of her torso and her legs were spread apart rather suggestively. And then her arms had been positioned like this, like she was a pinup. She was posed in a way to suggest she was like a pinup, but she was very, very dead, and she was very cut in half, and she had been drained of all of her blood. And then she had had some additional like bruises and injuries and lacerations to her body. Okay, what they had determined about her was, I think she had died by blunt force trauma to her head. That's how she had been taken off the earth plane. And a lot of the other lacerations that happened to her body had happened shortly after she had crossed over. And I'm not sure how they determined this, but they didn't really happen when she was alive. And then her body had been posed like that before rigor mortis had set in. And how was her body, this is so creepy. How was her body even discovered? She was drained of all of her blood, and her body was so white that a woman who was walking had seen part of her and thought that she had been like a mannequin, and she wanted to take the mannequin home or something like that to put like her dresses on or something. Okay, creepy. So let's see what her energy wanted to share with me. So first and foremost, as soon as I connected to her energy, I had the feeling of being watched. And yes, you can feel it. Do not ever tell me you haven't been like sitting on the subway or the tube or whatever, or sitting at a restaurant and the hairs on your body stand up and you know that somebody's looking at you, and then you pick up your eyes and you're like, oh yeah, I'm being looked at, all right. You can tell when you are being watched. And even if you can't consciously recognize it, your body knows that it's being looked at. Now imagine that same sense of being watched, but like amplified, but also flip it where it's not creepy. So it's like, imagine you know you're being watched and you enjoy being watched. That is the experience that I had immediately when connecting with Elizabeth's energy. She enjoyed being watched. And to that end, she would also sometimes then, therefore, dress or undress in front of her windows in her apartment because she knew that she was being watched. So imagine then, if you will, what kind of energy she's inviting into herself. Again, not victim blaming. I'm trying to just get us all, I'm really just wanting to share this idea and the information that look at any person's life. You know what kind of vibration they are transmitting because look at what is around them. Like attracts like. Okay. So she very much knew that she was being watched, and she very much enjoyed being watched. And she would therefore then go out of her way to also further invite the behavior of additional people to watch her. She was also a little bit indiscriminate and opened herself up to all sorts of interesting people. Not sexually. I'm not suggesting that she was a loose woman. I'm just saying that on an energetic level, she was a little bit indiscriminate about her energy. Again, she was allowing herself to be watched. That's allowing all sorts of energies to be attracted and drawn into her. And also, she was dating a married man at the time of her disappearance and later death. Now, he was cleared. It was known that he was not involved, but he was still a married man. So a little bit indiscriminate with her energy. Now, because this is a woman who enjoyed being watched and invited it actually into her by behaving in such an indiscriminate way, like dressing and undressing in front of her window when any number of people could walk by and see her, it did not strike her as out of the ordinary or odd if she felt like she was being watched. And again, if she felt she was being watched, she would further continue to behave in such a way that would give that person a reason to watch her. Now, what had happened to her on the night of her disappearance was she was dropped off at a hotel, or I think it was a hotel with a restaurant, or maybe it was just a restaurant, I don't know, but she was dropped off there by the man that she was dating. And she was at the table and she knew that she was being watched. Again, she's okay with being watched, but it was not by a complete stranger to her. So the man who actually abducted her and later killed her was not a stranger to her, but it was also not like somebody she knew. It wasn't like they were on a first name basis, but it was like a member of the staff or the hotel that had seen her before and she recognized them and she knew that they were watching her. She wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. She was just sitting at her table and she was eating. Really nothing out of the ordinary, but again, a woman that was okay with being watched. So the energy around her was one that was quite porous and allowed for that continuation. So who was it that had actually abducted her and what had actually happened? So this was shown to me and I couldn't get a clear read on it. If he was one or both, if he was one or the other or both. And you'll see why a little bit later on. But first and foremost, this is someone that was, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and then come back to this. So he was not a complete stranger to her. It was a man that in fact had seen her many times there before and had been fantasizing about her. And that is why when he had the chance to abduct her, he already knew where he was going to take her. Now he was not that she was like a high class, not that I even want to like rank it in terms of class, but I kind of have to here in this case for the following reason. It wasn't like a dishwasher in a restaurant that he's wearing all white and he has a white apron on and therefore he wouldn't be allowed to go out into the rest of the restaurant because it would be like, it would just like not give it the kind of like presentation that they would want for the restaurant or the hotel. So it wasn't like it was like the dishwasher in the kitchen. It wasn't like it was the chef and he had like a dirty apron because he was, cutting up vegetables or cooking all day. But it was somebody that was a lower class, but not so low class that he wouldn't be allowed into the restaurant or the hotel as a whole. And it was also somebody that was used to being there because it was somebody, again, that I had shared with you, had seen her there before, and she had recognized him and knew that he was watching her as he had all of those other times before. And he was therefore, because again, he was not dressed in a way that would denote his lower class status or symbol or hierarchy in the employees of the hotel, right? Like the bellhop is going to be dressed differently than the housekeeper. You can tell kind of by the way they're dressed, like what their status is in the hotel. So he wasn't dressed in such a way that would denote that he was a lower class person, that he didn't necessarily belong there. And that's why he was actually able to be, let's say, out of the kitchen, where he was able to see her and where he had seen her on numerous occasions prior and had been fantasizing about her. But also understand that where she was found was an indication of what his actual class and status was. Where was she found? Not like the wrong side of the tracks, but more like a industrial complex. Not like residential, not shopping, not business, kind of like on the outskirts of town where there would be like warehouses and things of that nature. So that's telling you a little bit more about him, right? He was of a certain class that he could be in the hotel, but not, and without arousing suspicion. But where did he choose to dump her body? Because that tells you where he was most comfortable. His recognition of what his actual status was. So this was shown to me about him. He was, again, one or the other or both. Either a meat supplier or a butcher. Because he had the knowledge of how to cut her body in half. He also had where he could take her, where her body would not, where he would not be disturbed and where her body would not be found. And where did he take her after he had abducted her? To the location where either the meat was stored or where he was doing the butchering of the animals. Okay. So he had the opportunity. She was inebriated. It was somebody that she knew. So it wouldn't be like she wasn't going to go, like she knew of him, but she didn't know him. And she was aware that he had been watching her before. So she had been in the hallway where he was. And again, he was of a certain status that he could be there. And why was he there? He was either bringing the meat or something of that nature. And then once he was there, the kitchen staff would say, oh, you look hungry, sit down, we'll give you something to eat. And he wasn't dressed in such a certain way that would imply he couldn't be there. So he would maybe walk around the hotel after he had eaten, or he would use like a nicer bathroom. He would see her, he would watch her. Okay. Now, so he had where he could take her, and he had been fantasizing about it. Look at it this way. I'm not suggesting anybody would, but if anyone who was watching this video would have the opportunity to like abduct a person, you might have a great number of questions in your mind, like, oh my God, I have them. Where can I take them? What am I going to do with them? Like, unless you're Dexter and you have a designated kill room, where the fuck are you taking an abducted person? Are you going to take them back to your house? I mean, that kind of seems dangerous. And then if you're found there with that person, or the person is found there without you, well then guess the fuck luck. Guess the fuck what? You're out of luck. They know that you abducted that person. They know it was you because that person was found in your house. So he had been thinking about this and fantasizing about this, knew exactly where he was going to take her should the opportunity present itself to him. And they were in the hallway together at one point. He had the opportunity, maybe it was late in the night. It wasn't unusual for him to either be walking around the grounds of the hotel or the restaurant or walking to the back or whatever. And because he was used to going in the back where the delivery and shipment of meat was delivered by him, he already knew the ins and outs of the hotel. He knew how to get it, or the restaurant. He knew how to get around without being seen, to be a ghost. So he had the opportunity, he grabbed her, he took off with her. And he took her back to the warehouse or the warehouse where he stored the meat or where he would disassemble the animal. Okay. Now, it was there in this place where she was detained. He held her for so long. This is where to me things got interesting. He held her for so long because he was impotent. And he could not complete the sexual act on her, but he held her for so many days so that he could continue to try. And the coroner had actually said that there was no evidence of, she was not, how do I say this? Again, I'm going to dance around it. There was no evidence of non-consensual sex having been had with her, other than her anus was far more enlarged than it ordinarily would have been enlarged. But, again, he couldn't complete the sexual act. He was doing other things, other than with his sexual body part to enlarge her anus. Because here's the thing, the longer you have somebody, the greater chance someone's going to put 2 and 2 together, or 4 and 4 together, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, who was there that night, who could have been responsible for this? Maybe it would have led back to him. He doesn't want to have her there to be discovered, or he doesn't want to. It's just a dicey proposition. If he would have been able to consummate a sexual act with her, or on her, or to her, because it was non-consensual, he would have gotten rid of her right away. So the fact that he held on to her for so many days indicated he had a reason to hold on to her. And because there was no evidence of non-consensual sex having been had with her, that's an indication that he was trying to do something, but he couldn't. He couldn't because he was impotent. So out of frustration towards the end, he did, as a way of demeaning her, which we're going to get a little bit into this as well, a little bit more into this. As a way of demeaning her, what he had actually done was he had violated her anus, which is I'm trying to think how to say this. Not the traditional way, one could say, that a man and a woman would engage in a sexual act. So it was a way to demean her. It was done out of anger and frustration at the end. And that was also at the time that he had decided to kill her. He had held on to her for so many number of days, couldn't do anything to fuck with her body, got frustrated, took I don't know what it's called, but it's that thing that it's like a meat hanger that they hook the meat onto and it hangs down, or they hook the carcass of the animal onto. He took that, and out of anger, he just rammed it into her head repeatedly. That was how he had actually taken her off the earth plane. And also explains the blunt force trauma that was done to her head. Okay, so in his frustration about his own actual impotence, he killed her, yes, by repeatedly hitting her in the head with I wrote you want to get insight into the way information sometimes comes in, those big ass claws that hold the cattle up. Even though he couldn't complete the sexual act with her, or on her, or to her, he wanted to debase her and demean her out of his frustration. It was almost a way of him expressing, he was reframing it. So it was almost in his attempt to reframe his own impotence. It was his attempt to reframe it, to say that it was her unworthiness of being, how do I say this? It was her unworthiness of him actually consummating a sexual act on her, as a way of him unloading his own feelings of unworthiness for not actually being able to complete the act. So what did he do? To further continue to demean her, he cut her body in half. He drained her of all of her blood because he already had the facility, he was already in it, right? He was the butcher, probably, or the supplier. There was probably always like lots of blood and gore and gook and shit there that was always getting, hosed away anyway. He had drained her of her blood, and he had cut her in half for the additional shock value. And then he had posed her in such a way that was sexually explicit, like she was a pinup girl in a magazine, as a way of further debasing her. And why did he want to debase her? He wanted to debase her because he could not, because of his impotence, could not complete a sexual act upon her. So he was trying to reframe how he felt about himself by saying, it's to himself anyway, it's not that I couldn't complete the act on her, it's because she wasn't worthy of me doing this to her. And how was he proving the point of her so-called unworthiness? Look at how he posed her body, like she was a fucking pinup girl in a magazine. Incredibly sexually suggestive. with her legs spread apart, draining her of her blood, draining her of the essence, if you will, of her. Not the soul essence, but the like internal essence of her. And then leaving her like she was trash on the outside of like a warehouse. Okay. Yes, and by placing her by the trash was his way of expressing how he felt about her. It was a continual debasement of her. And he also therefore loved the shock value that it would elicit. Now here's, I don't know if I should, it's a little bit, I mean the whole thing is gross. Because of the way in which he had, I'm not going to say it. If you want to look into it, there's ample evidence out there. You can look into it. I'm not going to say it. Now, he also loved the game of cat and mouse he played with the police. He had written letters, and I'm not sure if I had read that they were sent to a newspaper or if they were sent to the police or if he had sent them to both, but he had written letters that were sent, and he loved the way that would get everybody into a tizzy. Now here's the thing. He was someone that was mostly used to being in the shadows, right? He would deliver the meat. He would eat, let's say, with the kitchen staff, or they would give him something to eat. He could kind of walk around the hotel, but like, he really didn't belong there. It was more like, oh, he was like, kind of like overlooked. It's, again, he wasn't wearing like a white smock, and it wasn't like he was wearing a white smock with the animal's blood on it. He would put himself together in a slightly more presentable way when he would go drop off a delivery, but it was also like, he didn't really, like, everyone knew he didn't really belong there, so they just kind of like overlooked it, right? So he was someone that was pretty much used to being overlooked and in the shadows anyway. So with the letters, he could therefore first and foremost remain anonymous and remain in the shadows, but it was also the first time in his life that he had very real attention through what he had done. So this is like the best of both worlds for him. He could remain in the shadows where what was his comfort level, but he could also get one over on top of the police because they were spending all of their attention looking at all of these other people, the boyfriend, this one, that one. And at some point, it's so funny, I was reading this and I was like, let me guess. I was reading this on Wikipedia. I was like, let me guess, they're gonna go look at students in a medical school because of the way she was cut in half. And then lo and behold, like a paragraph later, there it was. They went to go look at students in a medical school. It doesn't explain where her blood went. It had to be in a facility that could handle that without being noticed or be considered to be irregular. So he was very much loving this. He could remain in the shadows while the police were spinning their wheels, looking this way, looking that way, trying to figure out where in the fuck or where in the heck had actually done this to her, not understanding that it was someone that was always in the shadows and continued to remain in the shadows through the writing of the letters. But again, he was used to being overlooked, and now, without people knowing who he was actually getting attention. He loved saying he would turn himself in and be at a certain place at a certain time, and then showing up and being on the outskirts or appearing as if he was a passerby and seeing all of the police there waiting for him to turn himself in when he never had the intention to in the first place. It was the most powerful he had ever felt in his life, and it also made up for his impotence and how being impotent had made him feel. He now felt powerful and smarter than the police, and that's what he thought about for the rest of his life. So much so that he did not ever need to reoffend or commit another crime like this ever again, because the high that he got off of the fact that he wasn't captured by the police and he was watching them get themselves up into a fucking tizzy for it to go nowhere on their end was all he needed. He needed nothing else in his lifetime other than that. He never needed to kill again. And again, on a subconscious level, that was going to probably trigger in him the feelings of unworthiness that he had felt in not being able to complete a sexual act on Elizabeth. This was all he needed. He didn't even need to reoffend. He didn't even need to try to take somebody else and have sex with their body. All the power that he ever needed, that he never felt in his life, he felt at that time. He needed nothing else, and that's why he never reoffended at that time. So I hope that that answers any questions that you have on the so-called Black Dahlia or a woman named Elizabeth Short, and if not, please comment down below. I have 2 more topics left. We are over 3 hours, but you know what? You guys always want long videos, and you got one today. All right. All right. The last 2 topics that I have are on the movie called The Sound of Freedom and the traffic on the bus, the school bus that the little kids are on. Talking in code. Okay. So first and foremost, let's look into the movie The Sound of Freedom. I have not actually seen it yet. So if you have, you can comment down below and you can let me know what you thought of it and if you thought that it was like valuable and meaningful. I know a lot of people who have seen it and they've all said like, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta see it. It's really important. It's really meaningful. You gotta go. I'll probably see it when it comes out on video, or maybe I won't. But everyone I know who has seen it has said it's like, it feels like it's a turning point in the kind of movies that are being created. And also because of the fact that all of the major studios had passed it up. None of them wanted to touch it. And it had actually gone up head to head against the latest Indiana Jones movie. And Indiana Jones, by comparison, had like bombed. So it went up against like Disney, and it has still continued to outperform like, you know, these movies that have tons of support behind them, of big studios. And this is particularly notable, and this was shown to me as evidence that the movie industry is changing and will continue to. And this is the first positive indication of that change. Because this is not just another fluffy movie, or it's not just another like reveal that are satisfying the Cabal's laws of karmic retribution, which is, again, we're going to tell you what we're doing and you're going to perceive it to be fiction, but we're not responsible for that because we told you. Or we're going to make movies about people having all of these magical gifts and abilities because everybody does, but not on us that you're perceiving it to be fiction. We're still telling you. So this is the first movie of its kind that is essentially a reveal, but it's not a reveal of the Cabal or a reveal by the Cabal. It's a reveal of the Cabal and the dark nature and the truth of what has actually been going on. And yes, I did indicate in my notes, it's because it is outselling the Indiana Jones movie, and it is an independent film that has outsold a Disney film with the unlimited funds devoted to promoting it. So this is the first real positive piece of evidence we have that of 2 things. First and foremost, the movie industry is changing because that a movie like this, even though all of the major movie studios had passed it up, but still that a movie like this was able to be made and was able to be shown in theaters shows you there's a new sheriff in town, because the Cabal would suppress this. This would never see the light of day. This is the kind of script that would have been bought and shelved and would never have been made. So this is the first piece of real positive evidence that we have that there's a new sheriff in town and that there's going to be reveals of this nature. And that this is also a reveal not by the Cabal, but of the Cabal. And it was also shown to me that people are speaking with their wallets about what they want to see. And therefore, this is the very first domino to fall that will lead to further evidence, actual evidence of change in the industry. We are also seeing something dark, but it's something that's dark and real, not like all of those action movies that have an overabundance of violence and gore, and it's horrific and it's horrifying, but it's all fake. So this is the first thing that we're seeing that's of a dark nature, but it's devoid of all of that. I don't know, I'm assuming it's devoid of all of that gore because you're not seeing the 100 dead bodies laying there. So it's the first of its kind that is something that is of a dark nature but is real, and it's not a garbage action film that may be dark but fake, or even a feel-good and fake. This is further evidence that we as people are also craving more real movies, and we will then begin to see more real movies being made. But I was also shown the kind of movies that we will see being made are kind of going to be like, I don't know if your local like museum has this, but we have like a science museum here, and they show like movies about like space and nature and the ocean on these big ass fucking screens, and they're like 3-dimensional, and it's wild. So we're gonna actually start to see more movies being made like that, but they're not just gonna be like in, the science museums. It's going to be, movies are gonna be being made like this to be shown in regular movie theaters. More movies that are showing real content. And I'm actually, what just came in right now is, for example, like when the world really begins to change, like where people, okay, whoa, hold on, too many thoughts coming in. I'm getting bombarded right now. But basically, like imagine, if you will, what did, and it's gonna sound really weird, I'm gonna tie it together, I promise. But like, what were the kind of movies that were being shown in like World War II? People would go to the movies to watch news, kind of like the way we watch, what do you call it? When we watch coming attractions. So imagine people back then would go to the movies, not to see a movie, but they would basically watch the news like as a layout of coming attractions, where it was like little bits and little clips, anywhere maybe like 2 to 5 minutes long of what the news, what was going on in the world, but it was with, made by like a movie. It was like shown as a movie, right? Now later, all these years later on, what we have come to understand is that what they were actually being shown was propaganda, right? It was propaganda mixed in with news. But the way that the movie industry is going to begin to change is, imagine, if you will, people are going to be going to the movies to see real movies on how the world is changing. So for example, when people begin to go into the ocean and they begin to start to clean it up, people are going to go to the movies and they're going to see clips of the people that are going into the water and how they're cleaning it up of all of the plastics that are there, and how they're untangling all of the animals, and what they're doing with all of these things, and how they're changing it to make sure that these things don't happen again. So we're going to begin to see movies being made like that, but not full-length movies. It's going to be more like, again, what they had done back in World War II, but without the propaganda. It's going to be like those 2 to 5 minute clips. It's going to be like a whole movie just of like those coming attraction type clips being shown of the positive ways in which the world is being changed. So one of them is going to be like the oceans. Another one is going to be where they're going to go around different cities and they're going to talk to different architects about how they are how they are envisioning change, and how it's going to be reflected in the architect that they're building, and how housing is going to be changing to be more, not sustainable, but more, it will be sustainable too, but more of a design that is meant to promote and inspire people, and to promote a feeling of well-being and ease in these people. That is the way the movie industry is going to be changing. Those little clips, some longer than others, but where it's showing positive material of how the world is changing on a positive and fundamental level. That is what I see coming up for the movie industry. It's not to say that it's going to completely disappear the way that we know it. There's still going to be fictitious movies being made, But it's not going to be with the big name stars that we know, that we associate, because that's promoting, idol worship. It's going to be, a mix of various different people that are going to look more like us, more real, less like otherworldly. And it's going to be a bigger assortment of all of these people. And it's not going to get the same level of fanfare as it has been receiving up until now. So there's not going to be really like these premieres on the red carpet where people are decked out to the nines, talking about the movie and how they got into the character and promoting it. It's just going to be like an offering. We made this film. Here it is. It shows up in the movies. If you want to watch it, go watch it. We're not telling you why it's so fantastic and why you should watch it and why you should nominate us for an award and give us an award. It's without all of the ego and it's without all of the fanfare. It's done for the art of entertainment and for the performer's love of entertainment, but not for everything else that comes with it. That was a long aside. So I did write it's going to be more like the kinds of movies we see in like National Geographic type things, all about Earth and 3D, but and the sea, but in 3D. And going to movies will be less of an event, but it will be also more of an event, which I know sounds completely incongruent. I'm going to explain to you what that means. Going to the movies now has turned into a degrading experience. Why? Because it has gore and gratuitous violence and sex scenes, and thus it has created a very low vibration experience for the moviegoers. Even the kids' films are full of symbolism. So the movie-going experience has been incredibly degraded. So through the ushering in of change, which The Sound of Freedom is the very first domino to fall that is going to create this change, through that, the movie experience will become an event again. But it's because the content and the quality of the films that are being shown will be more positive and of a higher vibration. You're not going to see this change happening overnight. Long term, this is what we will see. So I hope that has answered your question on the film The Sound of Freedom, and if not, please comment down below. Now, because I was looking into The Sound of Freedom, I then therefore felt I also had to look into the traffic on the school bus that the little kids are on. And this is what was shown to me. And I also, by the way, really pushed off looking into this because, again, really, really dark. Like, did I really want to go play in the mud? But this was asked by one of my members, Crystal, in our last live stream. And I was kind of like, I really felt like, you know what? I'm not even looking into everything as it is. Let's really go out with a bang. And I'm happy that I chose to look into it at the end, because I think what came in, believe it or not, is, I'll let you come to your own conclusion. I'm not going to oversell. I'm not going to even sell it at all. I'm just going to share with you what came in, and then at the end of it, or now I'll even say why I chose to save it till the end. And you'll see when I get to it, which is right now. It's almost 3.5 hours, guys. I haven't eaten anything yet other than my matcha this morning. I'm going to get a little bit silly. We're there. We're at the silly point. Okay. So the children on the school bus, and there's a lot of traffic on the road. What's going on with that? So what was shown to me is the souls of these children are either very highly evolved souls or volunteer souls of actual angels. And why? They have volunteered to inhabit the bodies of these little people so that it's none of us that are actually suffering. We, up until now, have been in a very, very low vibration. These things were going on. The highly evolved souls, or the souls of angels, saw that this was going on, and they said, "Till here but no further." God, coach, We're tapping the coach. We're saying, coach, there's 2 minutes left of the game. We're down by 9 points. I'm the best three shooter. Put me in the game, coach. Put me in the game, coach. Let me do this for the team. So these are the souls of angels or highly evolved souls themselves that are tapping God, and they're saying, God, put me in. I want to take this for the team. So this doesn't happen to the souls of actual little people. They have made the choice to do so that they can be the ones to absorb the pain and suffering that was meant for us, but without us having to endure it, as that would continue to draw the energy of Earth down. So that by them being the ones to endure it, we can continue to ascend. Put me in the team, coach. I want to take this for the team. But it wasn't one soul that was saying it. It was a collection of souls saying, no, God, till here but no further. Put us in the game. We want to take it for the team. Now, this is not to say that the families of those little people do not suffer, as they very obviously do, because these children on the bus, if we're going to go along with this metaphor that they're late, the parents might be sitting at home, because there's a lot of traffic, so they're late. So the parents might be sitting at home worried, where's my child? When is my child coming home? Read between the lines. So it is not to say that the families of those children are they themselves not suffering and worried about their family members, because they are. But it's to say that those souls that are in the bodies of those little people are the ones that are actually experiencing the traffic on the school bus and everything else that they are enduring when they are on the school bus with the traffic. And whatever is done to them, they knew exactly what they were signing up for, and they agreed to it without hesitation. Now, and why did they do this? So it wouldn't happen to any of the souls of the actual little people. And they're highly evolved enough to know they can take one for the team, or these were angels that were coming in and saying, not to the little, It's the body of a little, but it's actually the soul of an angel, or it's the soul of an evolved, a highly evolved person. Again, not to say that there's not true, genuine suffering. It's just to say that the suffering is happening by the family members that are missing them, but the evils that the littles are enduring, it's just the body that's enduring it. It's not the soul. It's not sullying anybody's soul. It's not, and this is, again, all done. They do not want the energy of Earth to devolve any lower. So they're taking it for the team, so that way we can continue to ascend, and it's not going to throw off the energetic balance that we are in right now. And it's also, again, just the body that's suffering. It's not the soul. Because these souls 100% banded together and they said, put us all in. We're taking it for the team. Now, when I had asked what we can do about it, because that was one of the questions, I was directed to not only the suffering, not only thinking about suffering, that it has to be big or grand for it to actually count as suffering. Because we might be perceiving this and thinking this is the absolute worst suffering that can exist right now. What can we do about it? So I was actually directed to look around us in our own towns and in our own communities, and to see in our own neighborhoods how we can best be of service to those in need. Because the souls that are inhabiting the bodies of these littles are holding down the fort on their end, which also then allows us, or it frees up our time to do what we can on our end. Look around your own neighborhood. Look around your own community. How can you best be of service? Because these souls are being of service in the way that they can. Now it's our turn. we can be of service in other ways. How? It's our turn now, guys. We get to be the light. So go forth and be the light. So I hope that that answers your question on that subject. And that concludes today's special edition AMA with a side of snark and silliness. As always, guys, I hope that you have found this video to be interesting or insightful or thought-provoking. Take what resonates and always and forever. Take what resonates, leave the rest behind, and always and forever stay in the high vibration.